What up, what up, what up, what up? What up, everyone? Welcome back to Financial Education and Business. We're going to be talking about crypto. I'm going to be trading, and it looks like trades are going pretty good here. $5 and $3. Just trading, hanging out on the weekend. It looks like things are going decently well. If you're here, thanks for joining. All I'm going to be doing is just trading and watching why Michael Burry decided to short. Why did he decide to short Nvidia? We're going to be looking at that, and we're going to be hanging out with the besties here. I hope you're having a good Saturday. So let's just get to it. Let's watch what's going on. I'm going to be trading on the left side. Trading on the left side while I am also while at the same time I will be trading and watching this. So let's get to it. If you think I should sell, go ahead, leave it in the comment. I might just go ahead and sell. Who knows? I might get inspired to sell some shares. So that's it. Let's get to it.
Chamath is here. I'm here. Freeberg's here. But Saxy Poo, he was up late at the White House. We'll show some pictures later. He couldn't make it today. But let's get started. We wanted to get you a show, and we wanted to get it to you on time for your weekend. Let's start with Michael Burry and his short. So you guys know, obviously, Michael Burry. He's the capital allocator from The Big Short. And he just deregistered his firm with the SEC. He made a big bet against AI and Palantir. He disclosed the shorts against Palantir a couple of weeks ago. They weren't huge. CNBC apparently reported that the value was like $900 million. Burry says CNBC was wrong, that it was just $9 million. But he had a really interesting accusation, and it's related to what we've been talking about here on the show with the build out of...
I'm sorry, but can we just talk about the complete and total financial illiteracy of the mainstream media? Mm-hmm. How do you confuse 9 million and 900 million? How do you do that?
I think maybe it's the cost of the shorts versus the value of the stock that the shorts represent.
No, it's because there's 100 shares per option. So they were.
Oh, I see. Yes, because the options have 100, of course.
They applied a multiple and they got it wrong.
Got it.
Was,
okay.
Yeah.
So the math, the calculator, is they got the calculator wrong.
It's not that they got the calculator wrong. It's just that they're so uninvested in assets that they don't know how asset markets work, I think is the more logical explanation. Meaning, if you've ever bought a home, you probably know what people are talking about when they're talking about financial elements related to a home. But I guess if you've never owned a stock or you've never hedged a position or had an option, you don't really know how any of it works. But then the problem isn't the person that wrote it, then there's no fact checking, and the whole thing just gets an entire news cycle on its own, which, by the way, helped his short, and it never should have. Because if you heard that some random dude had a $9 million bet against the market, you would think nothing of it. But then to manufacture a headline about somebody
That's a good point.
who had a moment, it was almost 20 years ago, but whatever, he had a moment where he was kind of right, is short the market, and you get it 2 orders of magnitude wrong. That seems quite wrong.
Yeah. And to your point, there is a ramification of it, which is it created a headwind against the already AI bubble, which was deflating after Brad Gerstner popped.
I'll take a walk down Conspiracy Corner.
Oh,
maybe the actual person is not economically illiterate, but the exact opposite, and then writes the error on purpose, knowing that whoever has to review it has absolutely no idea what they're talking about, and then they themselves are short. So I wonder if CNBC should investigate whether this person actually had a trade on.
Oh, there you go. Conspiracy Corner. Let's get our tinfoil hats.
The individual?
You're either a complete moron and you don't know how the financial markets work, in which case you probably should be working at some other media outlet, not CNBC, covering the markets, or you know how well they work and you know the people above you have no idea. And so you yourself shorts the market. You're basically copying the Burry trade, but then you rewrite the headline to look like it's 2 orders of magnitude bigger, which actually could have moved the market. If you saw a yard short I mean, yeah, like that would have probably gotten my attention had I read it. $1 billion is, reasonable position to have.
He was accusing also, he's got the Palantir short, but on the AI side, he was saying, hey, Meta and Oracle have been cooking the books with 176 billion in hidden depreciation to inflate earnings by over 20% in 2028. And so here's the chart. Basically, we've talked about what is the reasonable life of an H100 of, an NVIDIA chip, or really an NVIDIA server, if you think of it that way. Do these things have a 3-year lifespan, a 4, 5, 6-year lifespan? CoreWeave might be putting them at 6-year. And that dramatically changes your expenses, which then, of course, given the scale of the data build out, the data center build out could radically change your earnings because dividing the cost of a data center that costs 100 billion by 6 or 3 is, 2x. So your thoughts, Freeberg?
Yeah, so just to go into Accounting Corner, it's our most favorite but least often visited a corner here on the All In podcast.
Sharpen your pencils.
Yeah, so in accounting, we need a jingle for Accounting Corner.
Sharpen your pencils, get your calculator.
Under GAAP standards, these generally accepted accounting principles, when you report your operating expenses every quarter as a public company or a GAAP filer, you take your CapEx, anything that you make a big investment in, and you depreciate it over some lifetime. And there's an accounting process by which you can do an internal review and determine that if your depreciation schedule doesn't actually map to reality, you should make an adjustment. And so there's a periodic assessment that's done to do that. And just to give you a sense to your point, Jason, on the math, Google in the last 12 months made $120 billion in operating profit. Okay, and let's assume they're making $70 billion in CapEx this year. That CapEx does not get deducted from their operating profit when they report earnings. You take the 70 billion and you divide it by what's called its useful life, and you report that every year. So if you do it over 3 years, to your point, it's about 24 billion a year. Versus 6 years, it's 12 billion a year. So that would impact the operating profit by on the order of, call it 10%, the difference between 3 and 6 years. And so what Michael Burry's saying is that all of these hyperscalers have extended their depreciation schedule, or the useful life of their data centers, by roughly 2x, which cuts the operating costs in half when they report it in earnings. And so it's making their earnings inflate. So he's claiming they're cooking the books. But if you go back to the chart that you showed, or I could just speak to this, Google first made this change in Q1 of 21, where they said the servers are now going from 3 to 4 years. The chart shows the combination of servers and networking equipment. Separately, in 2021, Google took networking equipment from 3 to 5 years. And then in 2023, they took it from 5 to 6 years. And so this is a result of this effort where they went in and did an analysis. So what happened? What happened in the data centers is that the data centers transitioned from being primarily data storage and data transfer systems, where you would use hard drives and RAM and memory to store data and then transmit it back out, to being data processing centers because of the AI boom. So as AI became more important in the data center, more of the dollars that are going into data centers were allocated towards chips from data storage, which initially was hard drives, and you throw away the hard drives every 18 or 36 months. And then solid state memory would last 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, depending on the type of memory you're using, and RAM had this kind of variable lifetime as well. And then suddenly when you put these processors in to process the data to do AI, that's the majority of the spend, and the majority of the energy is going towards the processors. So if you pull up this clip, this is Google's head of AI and infrastructure speaking at a conference here recently.
Where are we, do you think, in the CapEx spend cycle? But more importantly, what are the signals that you guys use internally, right, in your thinking? I mean, you have to plan data centers, 4 or 5 years in advance. You have to buy nuclear reactors and whatnot. So how do you think about the demand signals as well as your technology signals? And Jeetu, the same thing for you, but from the point of view of enterprise and neoclouds, et cetera. I mean?
We're early in the cycle, is what I would say, certainly relative to the demand that we're seeing. So our internal users are, we've been building TPUs for 10 years, so we have now 7 generations in production for internal and external use.
We come in like
7 and 8 TPUs have 100% utilization.
And I think that's the key part that's been going on. I made some calls and I checked around with some other friends, and everyone says the same thing, that these 7 and 8 year old TPUs and GPUs that are sitting in the data centers are still being used, and they're being used at 100% utilization. So that actually justifies and validates the depreciation schedule being much longer versus shorter. And I actually think Michael Burry's got this wrong.
Chamath, what do you think? You're involved in, obviously, inference. How long will the Grok inferences be out there doing jobs? And it does seem like, to Freeberg's point and the gentleman in the video, that there are other jobs to do, right? Like, so as these things move down the life cycle, there'll be something for them to do. When would you actually unplug them, I guess, is the question, and stop using them?
The business models of these companies are just far too good for them to get to the point of having exhausted every other operational tactic that then they have to cook the books. These are not the 7 companies that are going to cook the books.
Yeah.
The practical thing that's happening that Michael is not technical enough to understand is that there are meaningful iterations in how kernels are working, in how the intention mechanisms of these models are being rewritten, in how people are swapping out HBM for SRAM in these designs, in how they're building, in some cases, really huge dies, in some cases, much smaller chiplets. All of this creates more and more utilization. So these things last longer, and they also need more. I think that in order to make these accusations, you need to have some modicum of technical grounding that I don't think he has. Here's the thing with shorts in general, which I don't like shorting. So let me just say this. There's supposed to be a check on financial malfeasance, but it's not that. When you look at these short selling firms, for every one of them that actually uncovers malfeasance, what it really is them creating chaos and innuendo under the guise of their right to free speech. And what they do is they put out some screed that tries to move the market. They're positioned against the stock before it comes out, and then they hope to close the position out and make some money. I think that's just a pretty sad and terrible way to live one's life, but it's legal, and so you're allowed to do it. It almost makes no sense for Michael to become technically literate, because he probably wouldn't have written it. So,
and to your point, the fear, uncertainty, doubt you can create if you're Michael Burry, if you did the big short and you shorted the housing crisis correctly. Now, that took 2 years for him to be correct. So these things are painful to execute on in his defense.
You don't make any money. Look, outside of my venture fund, I ran a hedge fund for, 7 years, 8 years. And here are our longs, okay? And you can find these clips on the internet. Tesla in 2015, Amazon 2016, Salesforce 2018. Just tagged it. And you know how much money I made on the short side? Because we always felt like we had to hedge. And so what we would do is we would bumble around looking for shorts. Never made any money. The one short we found was a wireless telecom operator, and it was a legitimate fraud. Its company's corporate address was a pizza parlor in Barcelona.
Diversified revenue streams.
Otherwise, my point is, it's just that shorting is just somebody's ability to cry fire in a theater, quite honestly. It's extremely hard to impossible to commit financial fraud as a public company in 2025.
I guess the other short we should take a look at is the Palantir one, because Palantir is, man, it's way out there. Alex Karp has been doing some great interviews. He's a national treasure, incredibly entertaining. They obviously have a great business. They're on a $3.5 billion run rate, according to their last quarter. But the valuation is $480 billion. This puts them at 137 times their sales. It is extraordinary. It's way out there. Datadog and Snowflake, Microsoft, these are at 13 times their sales. And I guess Cloudflare is out there at 37 and CrowdStrike at 30. So this is truly an outlier, Friedberg. If you were to give Palantir the same price to sales ratio as some of those highly valued ones, probably be a $60-70 billion company, $29 a share instead of 170. So what do you think of his Palantir short, Friedberg? And
based on the statement you just made, you're saying that a company is worth their historical sales numbers. And I don't think that that's how shareholders often do, or perhaps should, think about what they're buying, which is an ownership interest in the future of the enterprise that they're buying a piece of. When you invest in a startup, you're not saying, hey, that startup is worth what the employees did last year. before they even started the company. You're making a bet on the future potential of the business and what you think the cash generation over time will be. Your time horizon may be different than mine, and that's how a market finds a price. As a result, I think there's probably a market trying to find a price for Palantir where folks have a great deal of difference in opinion over what the future potential of the business is. And as a result, what the earnings generation will be at different timescales in the future. And that's how they're getting to the current market price. Who am I to judge? I am the person who would make my own decision of my own timescale and my own estimation of the future of that business if I were putting my own capital into the business. I've not studied the business well. I don't have a strong point of view or opinion on the value of the business relative to its future earnings potential. That's how I would look at it. I would make an investment for the long term if I were to buy the shares, not look at the last year's numbers and say that there's a valuation arbitrage opportunity and that's what I'm buying. So, to each their own. Over time, the market corrects itself. As they say, it's a voting matter today and it's a weighing matter in the future. That's Warren Buffett's famous quote, that the actual earnings generation in the future will determine whether someone paid a good price or a bad price, depending on the point at which they bought in the past. Meaning, at 400 billion market cap, you could be getting a steal, or you could be significantly overpaying. That's going to be based on your assessment, your judgment as an investor.
Yeah. And I think
No
people
idea.
are looking at like 30 to 45% year over year growth, Chamath, and saying, yeah, it's got a lot of, to fill in that valuation would just take a lot of growth. Maybe the growth accelerates. We saw that with NVIDIA, right? They started to have unprecedented growth. Any thoughts on Palantir short while we move on to our next subject, Chamath?
Well, I think the Palantir short is stupid. And I think that those people will lose money. The thing with all of these other companies, put your chart up there. The thing that the people that are shorting this company don't understand is that all of these other businesses that you put up there is a viable competitor of some kind that you can switch to. And so what I would say is the opposite of what they're saying, which is you have a low multiple to sales when the churn risk is higher. So look at the one with the lowest multiple to sales, MongoDB. There's 90 versions of what MongoDB does. I'm not going to say whether MongoDB is good or bad. It's actually a good company. It's an extremely well-run business. But it's not unique. It's just extremely well-run. Snowflake is not unique, but it is well-run. Palantir is both unique and well-run. And there's no clear alternative, so there's no place to churn to. And so I think the reason why it has a premium valuation is because the duration and the durability of these cash flows are much longer than what you typically see in any of these other companies. And if people took 1/1000th of a second to actually use their brain, they'd come to that conclusion.
Lack of competitors would be the reason you think it's more defensible. Yeah.
By the way, I'm neither long nor short. I was long in the private markets. I was an investor in the Series B of Palantir. I'm not long anymore. I wish I was, but I'm not. So it's not like I have a vested interest in this being right, but it's just so obvious that what they do is completely unique and completely differentiated. There is no alternative in the market for it. That's why they trade at such a huge premium to sales. And if you look at any market for any product that is unique and is effectively where they are the only competitor for what they offer, you will see an equivalent market dynamic like this.
And there is no competitor to the greatest holiday party ever happening December 6th in San Francisco. Come with your besties.
God, I'm in such a bad mood. I've gotten no sleep. I'm so tired.
I know you're a bit cranky. You're cranky spanky.
I couldn't
you're in a
sleep.
bad mood.
I couldn't sleep. Sax goes in the back. Sax sleeps. He's like fresh as a daisy when we land. By the way, when we landed, the winds in San Francisco, I don't know what's going on. We landed in Oakland. Holy shit, man. It was like a Category 4 hurricane going on in the West Coast this week. Unbelievable.
You were coming in, of course, from the West Coast. You were, I guess, in D.C., meeting with, I don't know, who? You had some business meetings there or some political meetings?
Oh, you can, let's play Where's Waldo. Here, Nick, post the picture. You can see. You see Where's Waldo?
Here we go.
Picture?
Here's the picture. Okay, we got a picture here.
No, Nick, zoom out. Zoom out.
Yeah, do the zoom out photo.
There, Where's Waldo?
Oh, let's see. Okay, here's a bunch of people in the White House.
Bill Ackman is right in the back. You can see his hand right beside Nat's. That's Ken Moelis, obviously. Steve Schwartzman, me, Burgum.
Look at you all the way.
Great guys. Will McDonough. Yeah.
Well, one of these guys is not like the other.
Yeah, it was awesome. What happened was we were having dinner, and then he said at 9:45, I'm going to go down to the Oval and sign the bill to reopen the government. He said, do you guys want to come? So we all came, all of us just
And
standing
when you
there.
say you were having dinner, you and Nat were having dinner with the president.
No. He was hosting a dinner for financial leaders.
And you were there
We were invited. It was cool.
at dinner. Very nice. So you went to dinner with the president, and that looks like almost as amazing an extravaganza as the.
I got a cologne. You know the cologne where he sprayed it on?
Yeah, he's spraying it on foreign leaders. They come in, he sprays it on them, and then they're allowed to come in the White House.
Me and Steve Schwartzman got a push on both sides of the neck, and we got.
Was Trump carrying the cologne with him and spraying people at the dinners?
No, after the press conference was done, he reopened government. He's like, "Hey, you guys want to come back?"
I think they should have like a little gift shop at the White House with all the Trump stuff, the steaks.
I will be honest with you; it smells very good.
Oh, so anyway, come to the holiday party. It's going to be a blast. There's a couple of tickets left, not many. So we're going to burn it down this year with our bestie, Tony Hinchcliffe. Casino night with poker. We got a celebrity DJ coming. Friedberg's going to be on the ones and twos. Allin.com/events. Allin.com/events. And hey, the tequila has shipped. So if you bought tequila, we started shipping the tequila bottles. Thank you to everybody for your patience. We were getting the bottles, but David, it seems like the bottles have started to ship. Yeah, people feeling pretty good about it.
Yeah, it's exciting. I think
Very exciting for
the
us.
world's greatest tequila is going to be surprisingly well received.
Okay, from the #1 podcast in the world with the world's greatest moderator. All right, listen, there is an affordability crisis. We talked about it here for the last couple of weeks. Last weekend, the Trump administration floated a pretty wild idea of a 50-year mortgage that would ostensibly cut payments, monthly payments, by 20-30%, and maybe theoretically boost home ownership. And we'll discuss this in depth here for young people. The idea was slammed by many people in MAGA saying, hey, this is debt slavery and it's going to triple the lifetime interest. You're going to just be paying through the nose for your entire life and you'll be an indentured servant. Politico said the idea was brought about by FHFA Director Bill Pulte. Pulte tweeted that the FHFA was, quote, actively evaluating portable mortgages. Now, this is a really good idea. That means you can take your mortgage with you if you go buy another home. If you upgrade a home, that would obviously get people out of homes that maybe they've outgrown or that their kids have left and there's extra bedrooms. And that is not happening because people are afraid to unwind a 2 or 3% mortgage to upgrade it to a 6 or 7% one. And there's been some data going viral on X. National Association of Realtors released a report last week. The average age of a first-time home buyer is now 40 years old. That's up from 28 years old in 1991 when I was in college. And in the 30 years from 1991 to 2021, it only increased a modest 18% from 28 to 33 years old. So in the last 4 years, it's jumped from 33 years old to 40 years old for the average first-time home buyer. Day later, clip of friend of the pod, Ben Shapiro, went viral. Here's a 25-second clip, and we'll talk about it after.
If you're a young person and you can't afford to live here, then maybe you should not live here. I mean, that is a real thing. Yeah, I know that we've now grown up in a society that says that you deserve to live where you grew up, but the reality is that the history of America is almost literally the opposite of that. The history of America is you go to a place where there is opportunity. And if the opportunities are limited here and they're not changing, then you really should try to think about other places where you have better opportunities.
Pretty obvious statement there from Ben Shapiro. Your thoughts generally on affordability, Chamath?
It's a real problem. I think that this is the keystone topic that has to be navigated correctly for the Republicans to win the midterms. I think there are 3 critical issues, if I had to sort of put my finger on it. Issue number 1 is one of housing. So Ben is right there. Specifically, the problem is that older folks own all the homes and own multiple homes, and younger folks just cannot get into the housing market. And cities and states do not do a good job of creating incentives for new homes to be built. That's one. The second, I think, is still around healthcare. The emergent data on the cost of Obamacare is horrible. Obamacare has been an unmitigated failure. The concept of capping gross margin, while it seemed good theoretically, has really turned out to be an incredibly stupid thing. So what that meant, Jason, is in Obamacare, there was this feature that said you can only make a 15% gross margin, right? And what the folks at the White House at the time thought would happen is that costs would go down because their gross margin would be limited. Instead, what they did was they just started to raise the gross prices of everything so that the 15% applied to a much bigger number. And so you saw the president this week trying to see if he could just take the health incentives and give them directly to people and put it in their HSA accounts so that it didn't need to flow through the healthcare infrastructure and the insurance companies. So that needs to get fixed. And then the third is on the student debt side. I said it last week, I'll say it this week. I'm sort of copying Peter Thiel here, but he's been saying for a while that we have to be much more sympathetic to the loan forgiveness. And I think he's right. So I think if we get these three issues addressed, something in housing, something in healthcare, and something on the student loan side, it is a transformational domestic policy agenda that puts affordability front and center, that will impact 50 to 75 million American households.
Freeberg, your thoughts?
If you pull up this article from yesterday, LA City Council held a vote. The vote was 12-2. In this vote, they limited the amount that a landlord can increase the rent every year.
This is rent stabilization?
Yeah, rent control. So it limits what a landlord can charge in rent. And basically, they passed the vote 12-2. And what they voted is that the landlord cannot increase the rent on an annual basis by more than 90% of CPI. CPI is the Consumer Price Index, which is published by a federal agency every year. We know it's the inflation index number that we often talk about on the show, with a floor of 1%. So the landlord, regardless of CPI, can increase rent by 1%, and a cap of 4%. So if CPI spikes for some reason, which I don't think has happened in recent times, you can charge up to 4% increase. So it limits what a landlord can charge in rent. And fundamentally, to think about this as an investor, so if you're buying a building or building a new building, you are now going to have your equity capped. Your upside, the amount of cash flows that you can generate from that asset, meaning the apartment building you're buying, is now limited by the amount that you can increase the rent every year. So that creates a disincentive for capital, for investors, to buy new buildings or put money into upgrading buildings or put money into building new buildings. At the same time, as we know, the city of Los Angeles, the state of California, and the federal government of the United States have passed law after law, regulation after regulation, statute after statute has gone into effect that makes it more expensive, take more time, and more difficult to build housing. The increase in regulation, combined with the cap in the economic access to free markets, I think has made it increasingly difficult for there to be a free flow of capital to go and build new housing and develop units for people to live in and for sale. Every time the government gets involved in a market, it distorts the market. It limits the flow of liquidity and it limits the market finding lower prices. And I think that's fundamentally what's gone on. The government is now trying to limit what a landlord can charge in such a dramatic way that it's ripped out all of the incentive for landlords to buy and own these buildings because they're now only going to be small yielding investments and there's no upside. So there's no incentive to go and build new housing. And then the government's made it difficult to build new housing for lots and lots of different reasons. Same thing happened with Prop 13, which we passed in California in 1978, I think, which creates a huge disincentive for people to sell their homes and reduces liquidity in the market. Now, I'll just flip to the federal agencies. So Fannie and Freddie combined have issued or supported about $8 trillion of home loans. The initial view on that would be, okay, great. They're creating liquidity for a market that doesn't have liquidity, for people that need access to capital, for banks that don't have assets to lend. And as a result, it's going to make housing more accessible to more people. That was the fundamental premise of setting up a government lending agency to support the purchase of housing. But as you fast forward over many years, the fundamental reality in a very liquid, well-capitalized marketplace that we have today is that that capital is actually excess liquidity that can, in fact, drive prices up. And much like we've seen in many other markets, like education with student loans, or like healthcare with Medicare, Medicaid, Obamacare, and so on, when the government gets involved and provides capital to, quote, support a market and make it more accessible, the prices skyrocket. So people will use a Fannie or Freddie Mac loan to buy a first home, and then they can go buy their second home or their third home. Or they can now afford to buy a more expensive home that they otherwise might not have bought. And so it, over time, creates an inflationary effect in the markets. And I think that this is a fundamental question on like, how are we going to get out of this doom cycle? Because fundamentally, we're adding restrictions for building new homes. We're capping the amount you can make on homes, and we're giving liquidity to markets to drive up the price of homes, all of which create this perfect storm of disaster where we're just raising our hands. And you know what we say? Please, government, do more. And if the government does more, I can tell you one thing for sure, prices are going to go up even more. And so I think one of the challenging and hardest things to do is say, hey, government, do less and figure out a way to kind of back out of this situation.
Perfect segue into what I'm seeing on the ground. You know, and I lived in New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and as folks know now, I live in Austin, Texas. And if you perfect segue there, David, there's really two different countries here. You have people living in coastal cities where you're not allowed to build units and rent is incredibly expensive. And you make the same amount of money. If you look at when I grew up in Brooklyn and I went to school at night, I took 5 years to get my degree from Fordham University. I had $12K in student loan debt. I was making $40,000 to $60,000 a year while I was in college doing IT. It's a big salary for back then, but my apartment, Freeburg in Brooklyn, was $500 a month. I lived in an apartment, an attic apartment. And so if you were to take two people like that in America today, they're making 60 to 70K. That's the average salary for college educated people who are 27 years old. If you live in Austin, it is absolutely no problem for you to own a home. Let me explain to you how easy it is, Freeburg. We have so many units in Austin, Texas, and in Houston, it's even more pronounced. But Nick, pull up the chart there just on rent, because you start as renters, obviously. Austin rent has gone down 20% in the last 3 years. Because we build units. When you build units, when you have supply, prices go down. And the stupid people in San Francisco with their woke bullshit are like, oh, you're building luxury units. Let me tell you what happens, dumbasses, when you build luxury units. The rich hipsters who are living in shitty apartments in the Mission upgrade to luxury buildings. How do I know this? They're doing it in Austin. If you live in a crummy apartment in Austin and you see these beautiful apartments being made with luxurious pools and restaurants, cafes, co-working spaces, you move to one of those and that frees up that unit. In Austin, if you make $130,000 a year, your $130,000 as a couple, your rent is going to be 10%, 15% max of your income. And you're going to be able to make a down payment of 10% because the homes within 25 miles under 45 minutes of driving to the city center. Do you know how much they are per square foot, Freeburg, where I live?
How much?
They are $200 to $300 per square foot. You can buy a 3-bedroom for $300,000 to $500,000. You can buy a brand new one, Freeburg, for $500,000. So Ben Shapiro is absolutely correct. The people who are upset at Ben Shapiro are a bunch of dipshit hipsters who went hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, are paying $5,000 or $6,000 a month in their rent, can never get out from under their rent payment or their liberal arts bullshit degree. If you're a smart person, go to the University of Texas, graduate with little to no debt, live in a modest apartment, put down a down payment, and buy a $500,000 home. This problem doesn't exist in Texas. It doesn't exist in a lot of markets.
Last night, at dinner, Jason, the president asked, what could we do? What are some ideas around student debt? And Bill Ackman had a great idea, which was we need to put the university on the hook as the first loss.
Yes.
And his suggestion was 20,000 was what he said. I don't know if that's the right number or not. But the logic that he made, which I thought made a lot of sense, was if the universities are forced to underwrite these degrees and they know that they'll take the first dollar loss up to a certain amount, 20, 30, 40,000, they'll be much more circumspect about what degrees they force onto people and the amount of money that they're willing to actually underwrite via these loans. And that will be a telltale sign that a lot of these degrees don't make any sense. And right now, we don't have a market check to tell young people that. And so we push them all into school thinking that it's the right thing to do. And then they're just completely saddled and they'll never get up.
You have to do math, people. You have to have agency and you have to be self-reliant. When I went to school, there were some kids, and it's happening now, where they think they have to live on campus. They think they have to go for 4 years. If you have a job and you take 5 years to get your degree and you don't live on campus, your debt position when you graduate is going to be much different. If you have a job that is, in demand in the world, you'll make 60, 70, 80K. If you come out with less debt, if you live in an attic apartment, if you do a little austerity, people, and you do a spreadsheet of your finances, which I had to do because my dad was a bartender, my mom was a nurse. I had to pay for college myself. I had to think it through. These elite lunatic kids in New York City or San Francisco think they deserve to live in Manhattan. You don't have a God-given right to live in Tokyo, France, Hong Kong, or any of the major cities. You need to live in the suburbs. You need to commute an hour to school.
France is a country.
In Paris, thank you.
Okay.
In Paris, sorry. If you live in Paris, London, these are not your God-given right. Live an hour outside the city center and take the tube, people. These lunatics think they deserve it. And this is why Mondami and the Legion of Dopes.
Can we just title this episode Grumpy Chamath and Soapbox JCal?
Absolutely. No,
Did you bring your own
dumb.
soapbox? Did you bring your own soapbox to Tokyo or did you buy one there?
Soapbox. Yeah, did you buy a Japanese soapbox?
You're going to upset. You're going to upset so many of the private equity wives that you spend most of your time currying favor from. They're not going to know where any of this
I haven't
comes
met
from.
any private equity wives. I don't know where they are, but literally these kids are so dopey.
Well, they're in your comments for sure.
I don't think they're following me on
I'm
X.
sure your bot army pays for some of them too.
They're not. I'm telling you something. They're not. They're definitely not in public equity wives for JCal.
When you run for when you listen, you're such a narcissist. You will eventually run for some political office, and that'll be the sign.
MayorJason.com?
Money.com.
PE wise
the
for
opposite of
JCal.
any work platform.
Absolutely. You'll be the first to donate to my campaign. Give me a break.
Bro, you know why I would? Because you're one of my best friends and I love you. So yes, sight unseen, you tell me how much you need, I'll give it to you. But it's not because I believe you're right or you should win. Okay?
I just want to be coming back to New York. After Mondami burns it down, MayorJason.com. Bookmark.
I am donating to you has no alignment to philosophy, ideology, or your potential chances of winning. It's purely
there
friendship.
it is. Hey guys, book it now. I'm controlled by big tech and finance interests. I guess related to the angst about affordability was the flare-up of H-1Bs again. Trump went viral.
Okay, we're gonna stop that there. I am still trading. I'm up $2 to 8%. Not trading a lot of money. I'm $26 on margin. 25%. But there is something crazy going on in Mexico. However, I don't know what's going on in Mexico right now. It seems like some kind of riot. Just want to maybe quickly cover this. What's going on in Mexico? What's going on in Mexico? It looks like there's something going on over there where everyone's just going crazy. Looks like something's going on over there. I don't know exactly what, but let's see. So Mexico, when the crowd decides it's done being afraid, so the line broke for half a second, and that was all the crowd needed. One right officer cut off from his unit alone, wrong side of the board, got pulled into the sea of anti-cartel protesters. So Mexicans are pissed at the cartel over there. Helmet, shields, formation, none of them mattered once. Yep. But this is what's going on. Jeez, that does not look good. So I guess there's anti-cartel riots going on in Mexico, and the citizens are not happy. Um, Gen Z versus the police. Mexico's new rebellion hits the front gate. Wow. Gen Z anti-cartel move already the loudest thing in Mexico since the last peso crisis, pushing straight towards the Palacio Nacional. This is far from protest anymore. It's generational indictment of the government, seen as too cozy with the cartel. Wow. Wow. People are not happy over there. I did not know it was this bad. But it looks like they've broken in. Barricades torn down a Mexican National Palace. Mexico City erupted after the metal barricade around the National Palace came crashing down, dust flooding the air. Jeez. Someone brought one piece flag. This shit is serious. Wow. Let's see what's going on. Mexico City. A crowd has gathered at National Palace. Protest President Sheinbaum because of systemic crime and corruption in the country. The leftist president is blaming right-wing business interests for the unrest. Wow. I mean, for sure there's probably a little bit of that, but damn. But this is a huge riot though, like this is huge. The Mexican president Yes, it is. She is a woman, so that's the current president they have, and people are not happy right now. They think there's a lot of corruption. She's a trained scientist with a PhD in energy engineering and has a strong background in environmental issues. Oh my gosh, that's the last thing you need as a president. You want somebody that's aggressive, especially in a place like Mexico. Before becoming a president, she served as the head of government of Mexico City in 2018 to 23, where she focused on public transportation security, social programs. She's a member of National Generational Movement, Morena, which was founded former President Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador. Wow. Born on June 24th, 1962 in Mexico City. But people don't like her. I mean, I guess she might be a little too cozy with the cartel over there, so people are not happy. The Mexican City protests are happening because of their president's Claudia Sheinbaum work for cartel. Let's listen to this.
Cartels in Mexico is absolutely welcome, and that is how the majority of Mexicans feel. The only ones who don't like that President Trump is sending help and trying to support Mexicans against the cartels are the narco politicians. That includes President Sheinbaum.
Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum responding, saying, quote, "It's not a minor issue that a senator gave an interview to a foreign media outlet calling for intervention." Here to discuss is that Mexican Senator Lily Tellez. Senator Tellez, welcome to Fox Noticias. I'm just going to get right to it.
Yeah, it looks like there might be, they're saying that they're a little too cozy with the cartel, and that's what's causing this problem. And, I mean, in a lot of, like, in Mexico and in, we saw this in a lot of places. Mexico is one of them. We also saw it in, like somewhere in Asia, and this riot happened, and where a lot of the leaders were killed. Massive protests in Mexico City, President Palace today. Young demonstrators accused of Claudia government being too cozy with the cartel. Poor guy, he's gonna be identified so easily. Game over for him. Jeez, they're scaling the walls. Wow. Mexico, they're gonna need to change some things. I wonder a little bit if, like, there is any influence from the United States on this. cameraman down. Yeah, Mexico is, I think, down. Gee, that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people protesting this. Mexico, the Mexican President Claudia erected a wall around the National Palace as protesters are about to come in. Yeah, that doesn't exist anymore. I think it got destroyed. The Mexican people are waking up. Wow. And the crazy part is Trump has kind of told her like, hey, let us come in and clean up the cartel, or else like there's going to be other consequences. It seems like there's consequences here. I think Trump might be doing, the U.S. might be pushing a little bit of this. Swarming through National Palace barriers in massive anti-cartel rage. Things escalated big time in Mexico City, Zocalo, as masked protesters straight up grabbed a saw and hacked away at the steel barriers. Wow. Mexican president condemns Gen Z protests, ignoring cartel massacre. Mexican President Claudia slammed today's fiery Gen Z protest outside Mexico City National Palace, preaching that one her Moreno party is huge. Yes, she accused the march of being the right-wing bot-fueled setup instead of listening to the fed-up citizens. I mean, that's what the governments do, though. They kind of say, they always kind of don't want to take responsibility. They're gonna blame somebody else. But I could see something like this even happening here in the United States. It's a little bit scary, but there's a lot of protests going on in Mexico right now. Mexico City.
Appreciate y'all. We watching this shit live. This is live. This is a exclusive viewpoint that we're watching. This is live. Thank you guys for watching. If you haven't liked the stream chat, go ahead and give me a like. It helps me out a lot, and it helps push this and give everybody else awareness, Chad. Thank you guys so much for the support. If you like the video, it helps me out, it helps my channel, and we will boost this to other people and bring awareness to others about Mexico. Thank you guys so much. Cassius Harris 1465 said, if you not from here, you have to Uber, or you're gonna get in an accident quick. I mean, where at though, bro? Where exactly? Yeah, like where you at right now? You're talking about there? Daylight Moon said, afuera, Shane Baum.
Practically Gen Z. Gen Z is protesting. I mean, they say Gen Z. Who really knows who's protesting right now? Yeah, Mexico City done. Wow, that does not look good. Well, I don't know what this means, but hopefully things calm down a little bit. Back to the program for the day. That's crazy here. Mexico is definitely not doing too well right now.
The stuff that ICE agents and the deportations. And the perfect example of this has come up with the H-1B visas. They took the Hyundai plant where you needed high-skilled workers, and they arrested and they deported a bunch of South Koreans. They, in a very brutal way, very disrespectful way. At the same time, that Lutnick is out there trying to get people to invest in the country and build factories here. You can't be deporting people with Stephen Miller's deranged process of running people down and treating them inhumanely, and then at the same time be saying, hey, we want you to invest and build a battery factory. Hyundai has a battery factory. These lunatics came there and arrested and chained up South Koreans who are our partners, who are helping us rebuild our Navy. This is where the administration has to speak with one voice, and it needs to be the professional, smart people. And this is another example of it. They already solved this problem, and they can't communicate it properly. Let Besson go out there and communicate this over and over and over again. It's a profit center now. And don't arrest the South Koreans who were trying to get to build factories here. Disgraziad.
Next topic. There was a massive three massive coronal mass ejections this week. These are giant waves of charged particles, protons and electrons mostly, that shot off from the sun. You can see a graphic here.
You have to pick better words, because
that looks like Uranus right now.
Yeah.
Did you ever burrito?
mass ejections shot out.
Shot out right from Uranus.
Okay, so the sun goes through an 11-year cycle. As you know, the sun is a giant ball of plasma. Plasma is where the particles are so hot, they're so energetic, that the electrons and the protons and all the particles kind of split apart. And so you have these subatomic particles moving around at extremely high energy levels. And when the protons smash into each other, that's what fusion is, and that's what causes the energy that we get from the sun. And because these are charged particles, protons have a positive charge and electrons have a negative charge. When they're moving around at this high energy in such a dense space, they actually create very powerful magnetic fields. And those magnetic fields pull and stretch the physics of the surface of the sun. And over time, there are these cycles where those magnetic field strengths get so strong that once in a while they snap and shoot out a chunk of those particles into space. That is the fundamental physics that drives these coronal mass ejections, these big waves of charged particles that shoot flying through space at thousands of miles a second is how fast they move. High energy waves of charged particles. And then when they hit the Earth, because they're charged particles and we have a magnetic field around the Earth, they interact with the magnetic field and they disturb it. And the disturbance of the magnetic field on Earth can actually have dramatic effects on GPS, on communications, and it can actually create shorts in conducting material on the surface of the planet. So for years, we've always talked about there could be an extinction level event one day. If one of these coronal mass ejections are so large, they could actually wipe out satellite communication. They could turn off all computers. They could cause shorts in the electrical grids around the planet. There's all these major risks. So this is often talked about as like, when's this big event going to happen? And this week, it was a very big event. There were 3 major coronal mass ejections that happened in a row. 2 of them kind of combined and hit the Earth at the same time. And we had the highest level recorded geomagnetic storm, which was G5. So this G5 storm caused massive disruptions in the magnetic field strength of the Earth. Fortunately, there was not a lot of reported damage, but we did get to enjoy the beautiful aurora as far south as Texas in the United States, because these charged particles with the magnetic field, they kind of move towards the North and South Pole, and then they combine with molecules in the atmosphere. They release light, and you can see these beautiful waves of orange, yellow, red, green, purple lights that look like they're coming down from the heavens all over the planet. It was really an amazing and spectacular sight. So it was a scary week from a solar storm perspective, but it created a beautiful view here on Earth. So that was the explanation for what happened with the geomagnetic storm this week.
But to be clear, there were no other adverse effects from the CME.
So far, there were some reports of communications going out in Africa and on small networks and things like that. I did not hear about widespread satellite failures, which is obviously always a big risk with these things, because these things can actually short out satellites. I mean, these are clouds of protons moving very densely at, actually, you know what, Nick, can you pull up, this is one chart to look at. So this chart actually shows on a log scale, which means every step up on the chart is 10 times bigger than the number before it. But you can see that right around midnight London time on November 12th, which, by the way, was just before I got on the airplane to fly from Japan to San Francisco. So I was actually considering not getting on my flight around this time.
Really?
But there was a, yeah, very seriously.
Well, he didn't want to have a mass ejection on his flight, Chamath. That would have been really bad.
Well, you thought like the GPS could go out or something like that?
No.
Like...
So this has happened in the past, and they do have redundancy for the GPS going out, but the radiation level spikes when you're that high up, but only at higher latitude. So I was looking at the latitude of my flight path, but they actually turned off all flights going over the North Pole because the radiation gets so high. You can't fly over the North Pole when you have this much magnetic flux happening, particularly in the northern latitude. So you can see in this image, that red bar is protons that are moving, that have an energy greater than 10 mega electron volts, which is not a super high energy, but more scarily is the green one. The green one is actually 100 mega electron volts. This is a massive amount of energy in a proton that can cause serious damage on a microscopic level. So it can shred DNA, for example. It can shred circuits and so on. So this is a very powerful set of positively charged protons. And they count how many they're picking up on these satellites where they have these kind of detectors as they come from the sun, how many of them they're hitting. And you can see this extraordinary spike where it spiked up from normally you see, call it 1 to all the way up to 1,000. So it spiked by 1,000x in 5 minutes. And so this is a massive increase in the natural background effect of charged protons shooting at this extremely high energy through space and hitting Earth.
There was that Carrington event, which was the largest one ever recorded. I'm sure you're aware, Friedberg, like in the 1800s. What would happen if we had that level of event today, given the infrastructure? Because back then we had telegrams, right? We didn't have a lot of equipment, but some of that equipment got fried during the Carrington event.
Yeah, I mean, that's the sort of event that can absolutely short circuit electronic equipment, either in satellites, and then they would be rendered permanently unusable. It can also, if it hits the surface of the Earth, because remember, what protects the Earth is the magnetic field we have. And the reason we have a magnetic field around the Earth is because we have an iron core at the Earth. And as that iron core rotates, it creates a magnetic field. And we're very lucky to have that because that magnetic field actually is like a shield. It's like a force field around the Earth. And it shoots charged particles away from the Earth and keeps them from hitting the surface of the Earth, which would kill all life on Earth over time. That's why we can't go live on the surface of the moon without protection.
We're preparing for a Carrington event. Like if it happened, you could turn off all the equipment.
No.
Like power grids and stuff like that.
So what would happen is you could have these voltage spikes that can actually short circuit, physically destructure the microchips, the little wire connectors. So this is a very serious risk to civilization, which is why people always talk about these solar storms being those black swan events, those 1 in a million year events, or those 1 in 100 year events that could render us back into the Stone Age, as some people say. It's unclear the probability of that, but the sun does go through an 11-year cycle. And during that 11-year cycle, there's a minimum and a maximum. We're kind of close to the maximum right now. So we are seeing these events very predictably every 11 years. But how big they are is something that's, unknown to us. I mean, we try and study the dynamics of the sun, but it's very difficult for us to be very predictive about how big these CMEs are going to be when they're going to happen. So we have to be on top of observing as they happen, but then we only have a few hours to say, oh my gosh, this thing's coming for us. Beware, everyone watch out, be careful. But there's not very much we can do to prepare. I will say, I have a belief that I think electron-based computing is going to go by the wayside by the end of the century and be replaced with photon-based computing. And I think we're going to move most of what we do today with copper and semiconducting material over to photonic material and photonic systems, and what will ultimately be quantum meets photonic systems, probably some point this century. When that happens, these risks go away. But for now, while we're relying on electrons and moving electrons around through copper wire and so on, we run the very strong risk of these geomagnetic storms having an adverse effect on the planet and on our core infrastructure.
Freeberg, I got to see you earlier this week in Tokyo. We shared a little tempura. Good times, yeah?
Good times in Tokyo. Definitely a lot of expats making their way from the tech industry to Tokyo. It's a booming town, booming tech scene.
There's a lot of people from America who have come to the conclusion that the great confiscation is upon us. This is what I'm calling it, the great confiscation. Whether it's California or New York, they're coming for your bags. And so people are now looking for not one, but 2 escape hatches. A sovereign state, Friedberg, in the United States, like the great state of Texas, where I hail from the past 2 years. And people are looking for an international. Everybody's getting themselves a passport or a golden visa. Japan, Riyadh, where I've spent the last 2 weeks, are amongst the top choices.
Do you see this image behind me? This is that forest city in Malaysia. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen.
You went there?
I went there last week. They put $100 billion into building this island, a whole city.
This is the thing that Balaji owns?
No, he rented a hotel. They have a big resort hotel. He rented the whole hotel. That's where he's running his network school.
He's running essentially like an in-person Y Combinator network state. You pay one fee for your apartment, your food, your gym, and you hang out with other people who want to be part of a new society with their own rules. Kind of interesting on the margins. Yeah.
But between that and Singapore and Tokyo, I mean, there was like a really interesting cross-section of people that I would say are kind of on the frontier of tech that feel like it's not in the United States anymore. And they're looking for what feels like the Wild West. Where can we go? Where can we put down roots? Where can we establish a new town for a new era? Because a lot of people view the US at the end of a cycle. And it may not be a massive community today, but it's a burgeoning community. It's a growing community. And there's this really, I think, interesting, maybe scary trend line of folks, wanting to kind of see this stuff happen outside the US and making an effort to put down roots elsewhere.
I'm going to start my own little community for Vicuña. Vicuña and Wagyu, those are the 2 litmus tests for entry.
Chamathopoulos? It's going to be...
You can only wear Vicuña, you can only eat Wagyu.
Chamathopoulos.
All right, everybody. Another amazing episode. The All In Podcast is in the can. Love you, besties.
We'll let your winners ride.
Okay. Well, that was a good one. I mean, I don't know what I think about what they're saying about Michael Burry's numbers. Like, I kind of agree with the guy. Like, I think there is a lot of investments going into AI and the whole infrastructure. I think what scares people more than anything is what Sam Altman is doing. I think he's sketchy. I think it might be worth watching Tucker and Sam Altman, man. So there was an interview. Sam Altman responds to it. So here's that interview where yeah, let's watch this interview. This is just a quick highlight of that of the allegations. And here's the interview of the mom. We'll watch both of them. But Sam Altman is just so shady, especially the way he communicates. That this is probably when they came out when the CFO came out and said, "Oh, we need a government backstop," and then she goes on and says, "Actually, no, that's not what we meant." Blah blah blah. And then Sam also doubles down via Twitter, and that wasn't true. And then obviously Tucker kind of interviews him on a kid that that was working with a guy that was working with OpenAI, was killed due to whistleblow. So he came out and he said he kind of did a whistleblowing thing, and yeah, this is him. So Balaji, a former OpenAI researcher, was found dead in San Francisco apartment in 2024. His death was ruled suicide by San Francisco Medical Office, and no evidence of foul play was found at the scene. He had been a whistleblower against OpenAI, accusing the company of violating copyright lawsuit in the development of ChatGPT. His death sparked widespread attention that raised questions about the circumstances surrounding his death. Practically, this kid came out. His name is Balaji, if I'm saying it right. Suchir. He came out and he kind of practically, essentially said that that the closer that the AI gets to the answer, the more it is to copyright. And Sam Altman kind of responds to that because the whole idea right now is somebody killed him. Somebody killed Varaji, whatever his name was, and they believe that it was a setup. It was a setup by somebody, maybe Sam Altman and the company, to kill him. So let's watch it and we'll go from there.
Complaints from one programmer who said you guys are basically stealing people's stuff and not paying them, and then he wound up murdered. What was that?
Also a great tragedy. He committed suicide.
Do you think he committed suicide?
I really do.
Have you looked?
This was like a friend of mine. This is like a guy that, and not a close friend, but this is someone that worked at OpenAI for a very long time. I was really shaken by this tragedy. I spent a lot of time trying to, read everything I could, as I'm sure you and others did too, about what happened. It was a suicide to me.
Why does it look like a suicide?
It was a gun he had purchased. It was this is like gruesome to talk about, but I read the whole medical record. Does it not look like one to you?
No, he was definitely murdered, I think. There were signs of struggle.
Sucks.
Of course.
That's why we invented the
camera. The wires had been cut. He had just ordered takeout food, come back from a vacation with his friends. on Catalina Island, no indication at all that he was suicidal, no note, and no behavior. He had just spoken to a family member on the phone, and then he's found dead with blood in multiple rooms. So that's impossible. Seems really obvious he was murdered. Have you talked to the authorities about it?
I have not talked to the authorities about it.
And his mother claims he was murdered on your orders.
Do you believe that?
I'm asking.
I mean, you just said it. So do you believe that?
I think that it is worth looking into, and I mean, if a guy comes out and accuses your company of committing crimes, I have no idea if that's true or not, of course, and then is found killed and there are signs of a struggle, I don't think it's worth dismissing it. I don't think we should say, well, he killed himself when there's no evidence that the guy was depressed at all. I think, and if he was your friend, I would think you would want to speak to mom or...
I did offer to.
So...
Actually, even though they're talking about it here, let's do this. This video so this video was posted by Meek Coven, and he kind of covers that interview, and let's watch it. He kind of reacts to that, what happened there.
It is possible Sam Altman is actually a murderer. Yeah, this is not to be hyperbolic here. Sam Altman was literally just interviewed by Tucker Carlson, and having trained in police interrogations, there are at least 7 red flags that I see in this interview, and it's scary. I mean, we are talking classic deflection, classic false dichotomies, classic appeals to emotion. These are things that people who are guilty do in interrogations. Now, it is possible, because we always have to assume people are innocent before proven guilty. It is possible that the CEO of the greatest, or I should say largest, not necessarily greatest, largest or most popular AI company in the world is a murderer for the sake of keeping this company the largest and most popular company in the world. Now, that is quite scary, but I want to be clear, that is my opinion based solely on this. So, my opinion could be wrong. Please don't sue or kill me, bro. Okay, let's get into my opinion and why I have this opinion. Again, as somebody who has trained in police interrogations, and I will give you the rationale for what I see. I will play the entire thing because it is a shocking devolution of potentially one of the most powerful people in America.
So you had complaints from one programmer who said you guys are basically stealing people's stuff, not paying them, and then he wound up murdered. What was that?
Also a great tragedy. He committed suicide.
Do you think he committed suicide?
I really do.
Have you?
This was like a friend of mine. This is like a guy that, and not a close friend, but this is someone that worked at OpenAI for a very long time. I was really shaken by this tragedy. I spent a lot of time trying to, read everything I could, as I'm sure you and others did too, about what happened.
First thing, I want you to establish this baseline here. This was a suicide. Absolutely. This was a close friend. I want you to start with that, because what you're going to see when we get about 60% of the way through this interview is that Sam Altman, who seems to be looking for the answers at the top of his shoes, let's not talk about that, because yeah, body language is a clue, but it's generally only a clue when we encompass it with other factors, which you're going to get plenty of. But I want you to see, again quickly, how fast Sam Altman was to say, oh, absolutely, this was a suicide. Because you're going to see a complete U-turn on that.
He committed suicide?
I really do.
Have you?
This was like a friend of mine.
You see how confident he is? And then it immediately turns into, how could you ask or question this? This was a friend of mine. Friends don't kill friends. This is not, this is beginning to turn into an appeal to emotion. We don't necessarily even have to call this a red flag yet. Let's get into the fun stuff.
It looks like a suicide to me.
Why does it look like a suicide?
It was a gun he had purchased. It was this is like gruesome to talk about, but I read the whole medical record. Does it not look like one to you?
No, he was definitely murdered, I think. There were signs of a struggle, of course. The surveillance camera, the wires had been cut. He had just ordered takeout food, come back from a vacation with his friends on Catalina Island. No indication at all that he was suicidal, no note, and no behavior. He had just spoken to a family member on the phone. And then
mind you, something very clever just happened here, and you may not have noticed it. Sam Altman did something that is very commonly done in interrogations, and it's called shifting the burden of proof. It is a style of logical fallacy. It is, hey, well, I think it's a suicide. Don't you? And it's when you get uncomfortable and you get a little nervous. Hey, man, well, why would you doubt me? And now, oh, wow, for 30 seconds, we're looking at Tucker Carlson laying out why he thinks this was clearly a murder, which we'll look at images from the murder scene. We'll censor anything that is inappropriate in a moment, but let's keep going.
He's found dead with blood in multiple rooms, so that's impossible. Seems really obvious he was murdered. Have you talked to the authorities about it?
I've not talked to the authorities about it.
And his mother claims he was murdered on your orders.
Do you believe that?
I'm asking.
I mean, you just said it, so do you?
This is another shift of the burden of proof. He never answered the question. Shifting the burden of proof is a very large red flag in an interrogation.
You believe that?
I think that it is worth looking into, and I mean, if a guy comes out and accuses your company of committing crimes, I have no idea if that's true or not, of course, and then is found killed and there are signs of a struggle, I don't think it's worth dismissing it. I don't think we should say, well, he killed himself when there's no evidence that the guy was depressed at all. I think, and if he was your friend, I would think you would want to speak to his mom. Or
I did offer. She didn't want to.
So do you feel that, when people look at that and they're like, it's possible that happened, do you feel that that reflects the worries they have about what's happening here? Like, people are afraid that this is like...
I haven't done too many interviews where I've been accused of
Oh, I'm not accusing you.
Whoa! Wait a second. This is another classic interrogation technique by suspects. The detectives say, well, it certainly looks like a murder, but I mean, maybe help me out here. Help me fill in the story. I'm getting people telling me this is a murder. My boss is telling me a murder. I got a box full of evidence over here. People are saying this is potentially, a murder. This isn't looking very good. Oh, how dare, are you accusing me of murder? Now, I'm exaggerating this, but that is the way that some interrogators will actually speak. There's the good cop, bad cop mentality. And usually that good cop is going, hey, man, come on, man. Just trying to get to the bottom of this. My boss put me on this. I want to get home to my wife and kids. I want to have a beer. I want to get over this. Just help me out. Let me fill out this report and get over this. This is very different from sort of the TV bad cop, light in your face, interrogation that we think of when we think of a TV interrogation. This is real human interrogating. And what you find here is that Sam Altman is now not only appealing to this sort of emotion, like, oh my gosh, how could you accuse me of this? But this deflection of, whoa, wait a minute. Are you trying to entrap me? Tucker Carlson, is this gotcha journalism? Are you trying to frame me? That is called deflection. It is a classic red flag signal in an interrogation. So far, and we're going to see even more of these, we've got the shift of the burden of proof. Well, do you think? Multiple times. We've got the appeals to emotion. This is my friend. There'll be even more of those. We've got the story that softens. It already softened at the beginning. You may have seen his comments. Oh, he was murdered. Excuse me. Now I'm confusing myself here. You got Sam Altman saying, oh, no, this was suicide. And 30 seconds later, after he gets pressed, yeah, I think it's suicide. It'll change even more. And now we get to straight deflection. The purpose of this interview is to frame me. And what does it immediately do to Tucker Carlson? I'm not even touching where I froze the frame, because this is exactly what this appeal is designed to do. This is a logical trick. And Tucker Carlson eats it hook, line, and sinker, which is normal because you don't want your guests to walk off or feel entrapped. You don't want to come across as gotcha journalism. Tucker Carlson is not a police detective. He's a journalist. This is normal. But watch this reaction. Ready for this? I don't even have to describe to you Tucker Carlson's reaction here. But in case you're just listening, his hands are up and his eyebrows are up and his mouth is doing the whoa, whoa, whoa. That's not what this is about at all. That's exactly what Sam Altman wants. He is uncomfortable that Tucker Carlson is listing evidence that makes Sam Altman look pretty damn bad.
At all. I'm just saying his mother says that. I don't think a fair read of the evidence suggests suicide at all.
Keep in mind, Tucker Carlson has a blend here. I like how initially he says, other people are saying he was murdered. I'm just asking what other people are saying. But Tucker Carlson puts himself into a harder spot when he says, I don't think he killed himself. That's what does make this a little bit more confrontational, but that's okay. Good for Tucker. This is Tucker style.
I just don't see that at all. And I also don't understand why the authorities, when there's signs of a struggle and blood in 2 rooms on a suicide, like how does that actually happen? I don't understand how the authorities could just kind of dismiss that as a suicide.
Before we get to Sam Altman's reaction, it is possible, to some extent, that in a very strange way, you held a gun like this, and then shot yourself in the head, missed your brain. This is a very uncomfortable way to shoot yourself, by the way. Not that I would know, but just from holding my hand, this is very uncomfortable. And then somehow miss your brain and then crawl around because you're bleeding out for 10 minutes. Now that is obviously very gruesome, but that is also exactly what is being described when we go through this potential of, hey, what happened in this suicide, quote unquote suicide. Now, this OpenAI researcher, by the way, he was exposing what potentially could be the greatest fatal flaw of OpenAI. That the more OpenAI desires to be accurate, the more it actually just copies exactly what it was trained on, which would be the opposite of fair use. Instead, it would be the case of, this is just straight plagiarism and copyright infringement, and it could be the basis for one of the greatest lawsuits or potentially civil injunctions by a court ever. And that's what OpenAI is deathly afraid of here. OpenAI, as a company, does not want to be shut down. They want to exist. And it's not just OpenAI who relies on existing. It's also companies like Oracle. Oracle just committed to buying $40 billion of NVIDIA chips. That's on top of the other $30 billion of capital expenses they're planning on throwing money into. But those $40 billion of NVIDIA chips are going straight to OpenAI's new data center put together by Oracle. So you have to realize Larry Ellison just became the richest person in the world. Do we really think that Boeing whistleblowers just died suddenly? 2 of them? Do we really think there was no foul play? Maybe we do. These are separate videos and topics to discuss. But it does make us question, wait a second. There is a lot of money involved in OpenAI and chips and data centers. And it's not just OpenAI, but it's also all of the companies that rely on OpenAI spending more money. Now, there are some, again, gruesome photos of this crime scene, but they imply a struggle, a murder. And I will explain why this likely took place. And we'll get into that copyright in just a moment. But look, this is where it is believed that the victim was potentially brushing his teeth or whatever in the bathroom and was bludgeoned over the head. At which point we have blood here in the room that looks like it's dripping down. There are also these smaller, more sort of fragmented dots, which usually occur when there's splatter. So like a hit. Rather than just a nosebleed where you'll get larger drops. You have more of a spraying, like an aerosol, right? Which occurs after you strike and come back. You strike and come back. The little fragments that spray, it's messed up. But in addition to that, you don't just get that sort of aerosoling droplet. You also get drops of blood that look like this, like they were in motion. Water in motion on your windshield doesn't look like a round drop. it usually looks like a longer oval kind of shape because it's moved. So we could see, blood sort of pooling in the corner of this room over here, various other locations where there's blood as well. There is what looks like pretty new damage to drywall. We see, a box of bullets that are sort of just placed out, and a relatively new gun box here. Wasn't in this weapon wasn't in some form of locked safe. It was just still in the original new gun box. But anyway, a lot of folks here saying, including the mother, that this was a murder, and that their independent investigation suggests, oh yeah, this was absolutely a murder. Now, again, we'll talk about why this could have been a murder in just a moment, in addition to, sort of the mess that the room was found in, which suggests, like, why is this vacuum cleaner knocked over? Why are things thrown around over here? Why does it look like things were knocked around and pushed around? There are a lot of things that make people a little suspicious about this room. Look at all these snacks strewn on the floor like this. I mean, it's one thing if you have, like, a sweater on the floor, but you've got all these new snacks on the floor. It's unusual. It's odd. The trash can's knocked over. Who leaves their dental floss, clicky thingy on the floor like that? It's odd. It's strange. It implies a struggle. And what you really find in the Tucker Carlson interview is you don't actually get a lot of comfort that Sam Altman doesn't know something. In other words, it suggests he knows something.
I think it's weird.
You understand how this sounds like an accusation?
A brilliant line, by the way, by Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson purposefully leaving it open-ended. You could see how this seems, right? Something to this effect. I'll play it again here. But he purposefully leaves it open-ended. And what does Sam Altman immediately do? He complains that this is an accusation, that Sam Altman is the victim. This is classic deflection.
Like, how does that actually happen? I don't understand how the authorities could just kind of dismiss that as a suicide. I think it's weird.
You understand how this sounds like an accusation?
Of course. And I certainly, let me just be clear once again, not accusing you of any wrongdoing, but I think it's worth finding out what happened. And I don't understand why the city of San Francisco has refused to investigate it beyond just calling it a suicide.
I think they looked into it a couple of times, more than once, as I understand it. I saw that, and I will totally say, when I first heard about this, it sounded very suspicious.
Yes.
See, that's interesting, because at the beginning of the interview, there was no, Tucker Carlson, you're right to think this is weird. This is so weird. And it does seem like he was murdered. Did he owe somebody money? Was he a gambler that we didn't know about? What? No, you don't hear Sam Altman start with suspicion. Sam Altman starts with, this was suicide. Remember that. Watch it again. We're at 37:49 in this, and I'm going to jump back here. I wrote it down to 34:28 in this interview. Watch how quickly Sam Altman denies this. Right here.
Quite restrictive on that.
So you had complaints from one programmer who said you guys are basically stealing people's stuff and not paying them, and then he wound up murdered. What was that?
Also a great tragedy. He committed suicide.
Do
you see that? How definitive that answer was. He committed suicide.
He committed suicide?
I really do.
I really do.
Friend of mine. This is like a guy that, not a close friend.
He was my friend. How dare you suspect anything otherwise? And then we go back to what we just saw, 37:49. And again, watch this. Tell me how this is not a change in tone. The story is evolving, just like in an interrogation. This has only been 3 minutes.
More than once, as I understand it. I saw that, and I will totally say, when I first heard about this, it sounded very suspicious.
Yes.
And I know you had been involved in.
Was mother
you were
reached out
to the case,
and I don't know anything about it. It's not my world.
She just reached out cold.
She reached out cold.
Wow.
And I spoke to her at great length, and it scared the crap out of me. The kid was clearly killed by somebody. That was my conclusion, objectively, with no skin in the game.
And you, after reading the latest report.
Yes.
Like, look,
I immediately called a member of Congress from California, Ro Khanna, and said, "This is crazy. You got to look into this." And nothing ever happened.
Of course not. Ro Khanna, come on.
Again, I think this is, I feel strange and sad debating this and having to
I'm not
myself
even
seem
debating
totally
it, I'm
crazy.
just
And you are a
asking.
little bit accusing me, but
This isn't a debate. You're accusing me. You're accusing me. See, what he's trying to do is he's trying to build sympathy. That at the same time as he's doubling down on his position that's working. Sam Altman has realized at this point that what's working against Tucker Carlson is saying, you're accusing me. Because the first time Sam Altman said it, you saw Tucker Carlson throw back in his chair with his arms up. Sam Altman realized, aha, I got him. That's how I get him off my back. So here he is for now a third time saying, you are accusing me, okay? He realizes that's the way he gets Tucker Carlson to hopefully back down because Sam Altman's really uncomfortable right now. Which, in fairness, if somebody asked you in a studio, why'd you kill that person? You'd be like, what? I didn't kill anyone. You would start wondering, like, what's everybody going to think about this? Oh my gosh, like, what if somebody actually does think I'm a murderer? So, like, there is some element of nervousness. But I get nervous when I stitch all of this together so far.
This was like a wonderful person and a family that is clearly struggling.
Yes.
And I think you can totally take the point that you're just trying to get to the truth of what happened, and I respect that. But I think his memory and his family deserve to be treated with a level of respect and grief that I don't quite feel here.
I'm asking.
Oh, false dichotomy. You could see Tucker Carlson's reaction here. What the F are you saying about my show? Because now we have once again moved to yet another red flag. We have moved into a false dichotomy. See, the false dichotomy here is really clear. Sam Altman is saying, A, you think I'm a murderer and you're an asshole for that. Or B, you're just a bad podcast host. You're just really bad at your job, disrespecting his family. And again, that sort of combines in with the appeal to sympathy. No, I'm not calling you a murderer. Well, then you must be a bad podcast host. Those are all of the subconscious things that Sam Altman is doing here. We are on 8 red flags now.
The behest of his family. So I'm definitely showing them respect. And I'm not accusing you of any involvement in this at all. What I am saying is that the evidence does not suggest suicide, and for the authorities in your city to elide past that and ignore the evidence that any reasonable person would say adds up to a murder, I think is very weird, and it shakes the faith that one has in our system's ability to respond to the facts.
So what I was going to say is after the first set of information that came out, I was really like, man, this doesn't look like a suicide. I'm confused. This looks like...
Okay, so I'm not reaching that. I'm not being crazy.
Interesting. Once again, it starts with, this is a suicide. Convinced it's a suicide. Yeah, you're right. It was a little suspicious. Here we are, just 5 minutes in. And Sam Altman, yeah, after I first saw the first set of investigative data, yeah, this didn't look like a suicide.
Well, but then after the second thing came out in the more detail, I was like, oh, okay.
What changed your mind?
You don't get that confident. Which, if you did, you would know what got you that confident. But once again, Sam Altman, here's where, really, you could add this in at this point because there's so many other red flags. Sam Altman is looking at the top of his boots for the answers. Just a little bit of a deceptive sign.
The second report on the way the bullet entered him and the sort of person who had followed the sort of likely path of things through the room.
Yeah, the way the bullet entered him was in a way that wouldn't be suicide. So how did that give you more confidence that it was suicide?
I assume you looked at this too.
Yes, I did.
And what about that didn't change your mind?
It just didn't make any sense to me. Why would the security camera wires be cut? And how did he wind up bleeding in 2 rooms after shooting himself? And why was there a wig in the room that wasn't his? And has there ever been a suicide where there's no indication at all that the person was suicidal who just ordered takeout food? Who orders DoorDash and then shoots himself? Maybe. I've covered a lot of crimes as a police reporter. I've never heard of anything like that. So no, I was even more confused.
This is where it gets into, I think, a little bit painful, just not the level of respect I'd hope to show to someone with...
There it is again. let's ignore that you just talked about wires being cut and a wig and the fact that you saying you were convinced it was a suicide after the second investigative report is somehow like so convincing, yet the only part that you remember was that, oh, well, the way the bullet entered his head. But wait a minute, the way the bullet entered his head was from an angle that just doesn't make sense in a suicidal point of view. So it should actually weaken your belief that it was a suicide, not strengthening it. And then, of course, as soon as Tucker Carlson presses him again, what happens? You know, you're just a shitty interviewer. Basically, it's an appeal to sympathy. Wow, how rude of Tucker Carlson. You see how rude he's being to his family, to the victim's family? You see how rude he's being to me? Pure deflection.
It's kind of mental.
I get it. I totally get it. It's
People
just
do
his
commit
family
suicide
has
without notes a lot. Like that happens.
For sure.
People definitely order food they like before they commit suicide. Like this is an
And guys, okay, people have to eat before they die, all right? That's basically Sam Altman's response here to, wait, what convinced you that he did kill himself? Well, I mean, people are going to order DoorDash before they kill themselves, right? Come on.
incredible tragedy, and
that's his family's view, and they think it was a murder, and that's why I'm asking the question.
If I were his family, I am sure I would want answers, and I'm sure I would not be satisfied with really any. I mean, there's nothing that would comfort me in that, you know?
Right.
Like, so I get it. I also care a lot about respect to him.
Right. I have to ask your version of Elon Musk is like a...
There it is. Tucker Carlson drops it here. Now, why do we think this individual was murdered in the first place? I'll give you the quick TLDR, because I think at this point we have shown 8 massive red flags of how Sam Altman is maybe probably a murderer, or at least maybe had some knowledge of this or something to do with it. I'm not saying he is. I'm saying that this interview was very suspicious, and it increases the probability, in my opinion. But let's just say, when you shift the burden of proof, well, don't you believe that it was a suicide? Shift of burden of proof. When you appeal to emotion, he was my friend. When the story changes, he killed himself. Well, I mean, I think he killed himself. Well, I mean, I have to say, when I first saw the first investigation, it was pretty sus. But then the second one, you know, that made me convinced it was suicide. What part about the second one? You know, this is really rude. That's deflection, which is your number 5. We've already talked about the shift of burden of proof. The doubling down, right? This doubling down of, this is a bad interview. You're accusing me, right? This is not just shifting the burden of proof of you know, who is responsible for the murder or the suicide, and putting the explanation on Tucker. But doubling down is in itself a red flag of repeatedly going after that shift, either on, you know, why Tucker doesn't think it was a suicide, but also the double down on, hey, you know, you're just a really bad interviewer. In so many words, you're being disrespectful. That doubling down attitude happens multiple times. You have to see all these red flags as amplifiers to each other. You know, and then the 7th certain one, I may have at the end here gotten some of these out of order. But the 7th one is, that's when I like to add in the body language. Looking for answers at the top of your shoes, looking down. By itself, maybe that's just somebody thinking. But in combination with all of these other factors, that's where it becomes a little bit of an issue. And then, of course, not even being able to unbury yourself out of the very explanation that you gave for why you were convinced that this was a suicide, because of that second investigative report you just can't happen to remember. Let me know what you think.
So how would you purify water in case of a blackout? Oh, I'd boil it. Boiling kills bacteria, but it doesn't remove contaminants.
But look at this. This right here is the person who was murdered, their website. He posted this article. This was in the New York Times. So he was profiled by the New York Times October 23rd, 2024. And he also posted this article October 23rd. When does generative AI qualify for fair use? And so both of these things sort of amplified each other. He was murdered a month later. Just a month later. And basically, without getting so technical here, and I sort of alluded to this earlier, what he really does is he makes this argument that over time, a large language learning model has a choice. It can provide cooler answers, which are basically closer to the original content, or they can create warmer or hotter temperature answers, which are further from the actual content that was used for training purposes. The more warm you get, the more AI tends to hallucinate. The colder you are, the more conservative the AI is, the less it tends to hallucinate. And the way you get something that hallucinates almost zero is you basically feed it the same information over and over again in training, and then you say, essentially you tune it to be very cold, and what you end up finding is that the output you get almost exactly matches the information the language learning model was trained off of. In simple English, the less creative you want AI to be, the more it just copies the original content of what it was trained on, which is basically pure plagiarism. In fact, listen to this. It is easy to see that jokes produced by ChatGPT are all memorized, even without knowing its training data set, because they're all produced deterministically. In other words, there's only one input, one output. So you can't really have creativity around that. And so that is a red flag that if you need something to be perfect, you just copy it or you slightly reword it. And it's just pure plagiarism on a massive scale. And this person has now been killed because they exposed it. Now, are we sure that he was killed? No. It's still possible.
To me, that looks pretty sketchy. Like, probably something happened there. And I'm not buying it. That's why a lot of people think, there's some stuff around Sam Altman.
Inside the smartphone are six.
Here is his one take where some people believe that OpenAI is watching, and if you connect to their API, they can easily steal anything that you're coming up with.
Introducing Aardvark, OpenAI's agentic security researcher. That's the future. They're coming for the app layer, so maybe you don't want to be dependent on them.
If I was a developer of any kind, I would never work with Sam Altman and OpenAI. Let me say that. This is a warning. People can clip this. This is a warning for anybody dumb enough to use Sam Altman's OpenAI, API. They are studying you. Remember, Sam Altman's been around the block. I've known him since Loop. He's an incredibly savvy person, and he wants every bit of revenue from the ecosystem. He is taking no prisoners. He's going to study how you're using the API, which he has the right to do. Sam Altman comes from the Zuckerberg school of business, which is give dumb people access to your tools, study them, and like the Borg, steal every innovation they have. And Zuckerberg got it from Bill Gates and Microsoft. Microsoft had a platform, an operating system they let people build, Lotus 1, 2, 3. Then they did Microsoft Excel. They let people build a product called WordPerfect and WordStar, and then they built Microsoft Word. They RIP. They were more than happy to have everybody at their developer conferences showing off their work, giving them awards. I'm talking about Microsoft now. Zuckerberg did the same thing at Facebook with their platform. Oh, Zynga's their big partner. And then they shivved him.
Here's one from McKinsey, the consulting company, Jason. It's
okay,
not
well,
really
that's a slightly different situation. McKinsey should be using it.
100
they don't have
billion tokens. Look at that.
Okay, great. So, but now if you were building Cursor and you're like, I bought 1 billion tokens, and they know the list of who's using the most tokens. As somebody moves up the list, that's their roadmap. So if Cursor was number one, and I don't know, what's another tool that could be using it? Suno is like in the top 20. I guarantee you, if Suno is feeding their information in there and it goes into the top 100, there's a business development product manager saying, oh, we should do a music platform. And then they will just go step by step and steal, I don't want to say steal, copy, liberate every innovation you have. And they have the platform, so they're going to roll over you. Do not use their API. It's a trap. It's a trap. Insert into the post here, Admiral Akbar,
yes,
saying it's a trap. And then take me in the facial thing and make me into Admiral Adbark saying it's a trap and make a meme out of it, producer Marcus, and release it over the weekend. That's your weekend homework.
First of all, I mean, it's Akbar. And
Akbar, thank you.
I'll just say that it was going to be very interesting to see who wins between OpenAI and Anthropic and similars eating more and more of the app layer, and on the other hand, open source Chinese models.
Anthropic's not trying to take the whole app layer. They're very cognizant of that. They want to, they're very rarely dipping down to compete with their customers. So it's just something to think about.
Here's a chart of OpenAI customers that have used more than 1 trillion tokens. Sorry for the quality here, folks. It's not the best, but Duolingo, OpenRouter, Indeed, Salesforce, CodeRabbit, iSolutions AI, no idea what that is, Tiger Analytics, Ramp, Bridge. Let's see, who else we know here? Shopify, Notion, Whoop, HubSpot. Of course, there's JetBrains, T-Mobile, Zendesk, Harvey, Canva, Cognition, etc.
Okay, here's what's going to happen. I guarantee you Duolingo will be built into OpenAI.
Okay.
Guaranteed. 100%. Indeed and job search, 100%. They'll do OpenAI. They'll do ChatGPT jobs. Boom. He's going to do every single business. Why? He wants to spend $1.4 trillion. In order to spend $1.4 trillion, you can't just be providing tokens and an API that go down 90% a year. It's not possible. So how is he going to do it? He has to own your business. If you're using them, you're enabling your own demise.
Do you feel the same way about all companies like XAI, Anthropic as well, Mistral and so forth?
No, because if you just look at the amount of product on the application layer that OpenAI is producing, they want to produce a device and compete with Apple. They want to produce, they have a browser competing with Chrome. They have a code thing. They released Sora to compete with Instagram and TikTok. They're going after every single vertical. Wake up, people. The world's greatest moderator and the world.
I kind of believe that. I mean, it's not that hard. Like, a lot of these companies that just drop some kind of new AI thing are literally just essentially replacing at least
the Elon Musk versus Sam Altman
50 to 20 different businesses every day that Gemini or Amazon, Gemini or OpenAI come up with some kind of product. Let's listen to this.
Sam Altman saga continues, and now we have a brand new deposition that just dropped featuring Ilya Sutskever, former founder of OpenAI, one of the leading minds in artificial intelligence. And there are so many interesting bits from this 62-page document, which I read in full. I highlighted the most interesting bits, and I'm going to break it all down for you. The cast of characters include, of course, Sam Altman, Ilya Sutskever, Mira Murati, former CTO. We have Greg Brockman, the former OpenAI board plotting against Sam Altman, and Dario Amodei, current founder of Anthropic, former employee of OpenAI. There's so much going on. I'm going to read through it. Let's get into it. And this video is brought to you by Recraft. More on them later. Now, remember, the context for this deposition is Elon Musk suing Sam Altman. And that's because Elon Musk thinks it is illegal the way that Sam Altman took a nonprofit, took all of these donations, built one of the most important companies of all time, and has effectively converted it into a for-profit company. As of last week, we now know that the nonprofit controls the Public Benefit Corporation, which still is a for-profit company, but it is more mission-driven than just shareholder value. So let me paint the picture. This is a deposition between one set of lawyers and Ilya Sutskever and his lawyers. This deposition occurred on October 1st, 2025, just about a month ago, and oh boy, it is wild. So a few things to note. First, this was recorded at the Cooley LLP offices. Cooley is one of the most prominent law firms in Silicon Valley. And The plaintiff, Elon Musk, versus the defendant, Samuel Altman et al. And there are also appearances from Microsoft, which is fascinating, although it's barely mentioned. So again, this is Elon Musk versus Sam Altman, but it's almost entirely about Ilya Sutskever, Sam Altman's firing, the board dynamics prior to that firing, and the subsequent fallout. So the first thing we learned is that Ilya Sutskever put together a 52-page memo in preparation of attempting to get Sam Altman fired from OpenAI. There was a long history of dissatisfaction from Ilya towards Sam Altman about how Sam Altman was running the company specifically. And this became public information at the time of the firing just about 2 years ago, that Sam Altman exhibits a consistent pattern of lying, undermining his execs and pitting his execs against one another. And now back to the 52-page memo. I'm going to tell you what was actually in the memo and how it came to be, but more on that in a minute. And the first line of questioning between lawyers and Ilya Sutskever, that is not Ilya's lawyers, those were the opposing lawyers, was about the 52-page document and who he sent it to and why he didn't send it to Sam Altman. I think it's obvious why, but listen to his words. Why didn't you send it to the entire board? It being the document, the board being the entire board of directors for OpenAI. Because we were having the discussions with the independent directors only. Independent meaning not aligned with Sam Altman, I believe. And why didn't you send it to Sam Altman? Because I felt that had he become aware of these discussions, he would just find a way to make them disappear. So at this point, right around the time of the firing, Ilya Sutskever already had a pretty bad relationship with Sam Altman. He was already kind of secretly putting together this document in hopes that he would be able to convince the board to fire Sam Altman, which he actually was able to do. Now, obviously, you remember about a week later, Sam Altman came back, but the initial firing did happen. And he also thought that if Sam Altman found out about the discussions, he would actually just make them disappear. And more on that later, because Ilya Sutskever really believes that Sam Altman and other CEOs are killers. They are very political, they are cutthroat, and they're willing to do whatever it takes to seek and control power. Now, interestingly, the board actually asked Ilya to prepare the document. So it's kind of weird. It's a little confusing how that went down, but listen to this. The context for this document is that the independent board members asked me to prepare it, and I did. And I was pretty careful. Most of the screenshots that I have, most or all, I don't remember, I get them from Mira Murati. And so it seems Mira Murati was also very much aligned with Ilya in that Sam Altman had to go. She was capturing screenshots of chat interactions, text, Slack, whatever it is, as evidence, as a breadcrumb trail to showing that Sam Altman is a poor leader. Now, I'm not giving my opinion on any of this. I'm just trying to convey what was actually going on and provide a little bit of context. It made sense to include them being the screenshots, in order to paint a picture from a large number of small pieces of evidence or items. And so they're putting together evidence that he's a bad leader, but what does that actually mean? Are you still wasting time jumping between your AI chats and design canvas? Recraft State, and at the app, the entire in the description, letting the directors ask you to prepare your memo exhibit 19. It was most likely Adam D'Angelo. Who is Adam D'Angelo? So first, a little bit of background. He was educated at Phillips Exeter Academy, the same academy that Mark Zuckerberg went to. He joined Facebook shortly after its launch, served as its chief technology officer from 2006 to 2008, and as vice president of engineering until 2008. Then in 2009, he co-founded Quora, which is a Q&A website very popular in Silicon Valley, and he has been serving as CEO ever since. And he has served on the board of OpenAI since 2018. And kind of surprisingly, Adam D'Angelo is still on the board of OpenAI, even after most of the board that went against Sam Altman was fired. He's still there. And so Ilya continues and says, I had discussions with the independent board members discussing Sam Altman. And after having these discussions, either Adam or the three of them together, I don't remember, have asked me to collect supporting screenshots. And the three of them together, Adam D'Angelo, Helen Toner, and Tasha McCauley. And I already explained who Adam D'Angelo is, but let's go over the other two. Now, this is Helen Toner. She is an Australian-born AI researcher. And she, especially at the time of the Sam Altman thing, was quite vocal about it. She was a main player in his firing. She actually ended up writing kind of a negative piece about OpenAI while still being on the board at OpenAI. Then we have Tasha McCauley, another OpenAI board member at the time, a tech entrepreneur and robot/AI specialist. And kind of interesting tidbit, she's married to Joseph Gordon-Levitt. Now, back to the point, why are people aligning against Sam Altman? Why did they think he was a bad leader? Well, according to this document, according to other documents that have come out since the firing, here is the crux of the issue. Sam exhibits a consistent pattern of lying, undermining his execs, and pitting his execs against one another. And the lawyer says that was clearly your view at the time. And Ilya says, correct. So he continues to ask, and did you want them to take action over what you wrote? What you wrote being that memo. And I wanted them to become aware of it, but my opinion was that action was appropriate. And what action did you think was appropriate?
termination. Ilya thought Sam needed to be out. And Ilya was very worried about that memo getting out and leaking. And the lawyer continues, and you sent it using a form of disappearing email. Is that right? Yes. Why? Because I was worried that those memos will somehow leak. But it wasn't all against Sam Altman. He also had similar thoughts of Greg Brockman. So lawyer, you drafted a similar memo that was acritical of Greg Brockman, correct? Yes. Then they transitioned to talking about Ilya's equity in OpenAI. So were you concerned about losing your equity in OpenAI at the time? Ilya says, I was not concerned, as he probably shouldn't have been because that is pretty ironclad equity that he has. Then he asks, how much was your equity worth? So what was your equity at OpenAI worth at the time? What did you think it was worth? Then the lawyers go back and forth as to why that's relevant for this deposition. Ultimately, he doesn't end up answering the question directly. Then the questioning goes towards why the board eventually, after the firing, decided to resign and reinstate Sam Altman. And just the quick history lesson, they fired him, and just about a week later, he was back, and the board had resigned, and he was basically in control, he being Sam Altman. So right now, my view is that with very few exceptions, most likely a person who is going to be in charge is going to be very good with the way of power. And it will be a lot like choosing between different politicians. What does Ilya actually mean? Well, he means Sam Altman has sharp elbows and is willing to use them. He is saying Sam Altman is extremely good at the political nature of power seeking. And he continues, the person in charge of what? AGI. Ilya continues, that's how the world seems to work. I think it's not impossible, but I think it's very hard for someone who would be described as a saint to make it. Basically, if you're a good guy, you're not really going to be in these powerful positions at these companies. I think it's worth trying. I just think it's like choosing between different politicians. Who is going to be the head of the state? Then they continue and talk about the removal of Sam Altman and the process therein. So from the lawyer, and in reviewing the steps that preceded the removal, do you think that process was correct? Ilya says, one thing I could say is that the process was rushed. Obviously, they fumbled firing Sam Altman. He came back and was more powerful than ever. But why? Well, the process was rushed. Why was it rushed? Well, I think it was rushed because the board was inexperienced. And he continues, and the lawyer says, inexperienced in what? In board matters. Then they get into this line of questioning around how familiar Tasha and Helen, the two board members who wanted to fire Sam Altman, were with OpenAI's day-to-day operations. And it's wild because if you remember, Helen said she found out about ChatGPT initially from Twitter. She didn't even know about it. Watch this clip.
When ChatGPT came out, November 2022, the board was not informed in advance about that. We learned about ChatGPT on Twitter.
And here's a clip of Helen Toner explaining why she wanted Sam Altman out of OpenAI.
Sam didn't inform the board that he owned the OpenAI startup fund, even though he, constantly was claiming to be an independent board member with no financial interest in the company. On multiple occasions, he gave us inaccurate information about the small number of formal safety processes that the company did have in place, meaning that it was basically impossible for the board to know how well those safety processes were working or what might need to change. And then, a last example that I can share, because it's been very widely reported, relates to this paper that I wrote, which has been, I think, way overplayed in the press. The problem was that after the paper came out, Sam started lying to other board members in order to try and push me off the board. So it was another example that just really damaged our ability to trust him. And
so back to the deposition. How familiar did Tasha and Helen appear to you to be with OpenAI's operations? Ilya, they seem to have some familiarity, but it's hard for me to assess. Did you view them as experts in AI safety? Then his counsel objects. They go back and forth as to why this is all relevant to the Musk versus Sam Altman lawsuit. Remember, this is what it's all about. Then do you recall in October 2023, Helen Toner publishing an article criticizing OpenAI? He says, I do recall. What do you recall about that? I don't recall the nature of the criticism, but I recall it was praising Anthropic. I found it a strange thing for her to do. Did you think it was appropriate for her to do as a board member of OpenAI? I thought it was not far from obviously inappropriate. So he's saying, yes, it was inappropriate. Then after the firing, after Helen Toner was removed from the board, here is the line of questioning. Did you support removing Helen Toner from the board or asking her to leave? Ilya, at least at one point, I expressed support. Remember, Ilya stayed on after this whole fiasco happened for a while, actually. And he supported, at least for a time being, getting rid of Helen Toner. Now, here is something crazy. Helen Toner believed that if Sam Altman leaving OpenAI caused OpenAI to get destroyed, that would still be in line with OpenAI's mission. So she was willing to kill the company and still believed it was the right thing to do. So after Sam was removed, do you recall Helen Toner telling employees that allowing the company to be destroyed would be consistent with the mission? Ilya, I do recall. What was the context of that comment? The executives. It was a meeting with the board members and the executive team. The executives told the board that if Sam does not return, then OpenAI will be destroyed, and that's inconsistent with OpenAI's mission. And Helen Toner said something to the effect of that it is consistent, but I think she said it even more directly than that. She was willing to let OpenAI be destroyed. Now, the lawyer asked Ilya, what do you think? Do you think that was consistent? He says, I could imagine hypothetical extreme circumstances. That answer would be yes. But at that point in time, the answer was definitely no from me. Now, they start asking about Sam's time at Y Combinator. If you're not familiar, Y Combinator is the premier accelerator in Silicon Valley. They invest in thousands of startups, many of which you have heard of: Airbnb, Stripe, Coinbase, and many more. And Sam Altman went through the accelerator with his own company and then eventually became president of YC. So the lawyer asks, and you say here, there's reason to believe that Sam was removed from YC in the past for a reason similar to the one that you identify in this document. And here the lawyer's reading a document to Ilya. Sam was pushed out from YC for similar behaviors. He was creating chaos, starting lots of new projects, pitting people against each other, and thus was not managing YC well. And Paul Graham did actually refute this claim. So May 30th, 2024, I got tired of hearing that YC fired Sam. So here's what actually happened. People have been claiming YC fired Sam Altman. That's not true. Here's what actually happened. For several years, he was running both YC and OpenAI. But when OpenAI announced that it was going to have a for-profit subsidiary and that Sam was going to be the CEO, we, specifically Jessica, one of the founders of YC, Paul Graham's wife, told him that if he was going to work full-time on OpenAI, we should find someone else to run YC, and he agreed. If he'd said that he was going to find someone else to be CEO of OpenAI so that he could focus 100% on YC, we'd been fine with that too. We didn't want him to leave, just choose one or the other. And that's understandable and seemingly continues to be the dynamic between Paul Graham, YC, and Sam Altman. They all seem to have a very good relationship. They all seem to praise Sam Altman's executive ability. And Mira Murati was the person who told Ilya this. So this information came only from Mira? Ilya, yes. Did you seek to verify the information with Brad? That is Brad Lightcap, currently Chief Operating Officer of OpenAI. And Ilya says, no, he did not verify that information. And it continues. The lawyer is reading a document again. Interestingly, it is my understanding that Greg Haas was essentially fired from Stripe as well. Ilya says, yes. What was the basis for that allegation? Again, Mira told me. Did you seek to verify it with Greg? No, why not? It didn't occur to me. I thought that I fully believed the information that Mira was giving me. Then here is a section entitled Pitting People Against Each Other. So the lawyer says, turning to the next page, you see an example that's offered is Daniela, which is Daniela Amodei, Dario Amodei's sister, also both founders and leaders of Anthropic. Daniela versus Mira. Who told you that Sam pitted Daniela against Mira? Answer again. Mira. Mira really was telling Ilya all of these things. Now, keep in mind, this may have been what Mira was perceiving happening. Whether it is true or not, that is up for discussion. Now, at a certain point, it becomes clear that Dario wanted to be the head of research at OpenAI, and that is a replacement for Greg Brockman. And Sam Altman was not making a firm decision, either saying, yes, Dario, you can lead, or no, Greg Brockman is the leader, you report to him. So as read, Sam was not taking a firm position in respect of Dario wanting to run all of research at OpenAI and to have Greg fired. And so not only did Dario want to run all of research, but he also wanted Greg Brockman out. And Ilya says the real problem was that, well, let me just read it. My recollection of what I wrote here is that I was faulting Sam for not accepting or rejecting Dario's conditions. Dario said, I want to take over and here's what I need to make that happen. And Sam didn't just say okay or no. He simply just let it sit there. And of course, lack of decision-making is oftentimes worse than the actual decision being made. So they go on to ask, was Dario's conditions fair to take over? And Ilya says, I don't have precise enough knowledge of Dario's conditions, but my overall sense is that they were not fair and that Sam should have rejected them outright. And then they start to talk about Jakub Pachaki. As read, so this is the lawyer reading a document, involves Sam lying, undermining Mira, undermining Ilya, and pitting Jakub against Ilya. Joint work with Greg and Jakub. What was the lying in the episode by Sam in the episode involving Jakub? Ilya replies, Sam was telling me and Jakub conflicting things about the way the company would be run. And just keep in mind, Jakub Pachaki is currently chief scientist at OpenAI alongside Mark Chen, who is the chief research officer. And the lawyer continues to ask questions to Ilya, asking him follow-up questions. And I think this is really funny. Ilya's lawyer says, we're now bordering on harassing the witness, and I am going to shut it down. All right, then we get to a really interesting bit. It turns out, and I didn't know about this, I don't think this was public until now, Anthropic, during all of this conflict, actually tried to either acquire or merge with OpenAI. Remember, Dario had already left. He started Anthropic with his sister, and now during the time Sam Altman was fired, he tried to merge with OpenAI. So, lawyer, do you know whether a proposal was made around the time for OpenAI to merge with Anthropic? He answers, I do know about that. The lawyer says, tell me. I don't know whether it was Helen who reached out to Anthropic or whether Anthropic reached out to Helen Toner from OpenAI's board, but they reached out with a proposal to be merged with OpenAI and take over its leadership. And what ended up happening with that proposal? I recall Anthropic expressing their excitement about it and expressing the issue, the practical challenges that they would have with it. And what was your response? Asking Ilya. I was very unhappy about it. Why? Because I really did not want OpenAI to merge with Anthropic. Why not? I just didn't want to. And then what about the other board members? Were they supportive? They were a lot more supportive. Yes. Were all of them supportive? I think at the very least, none were unsupportive. And then he asked who was the most supportive, and he says, Helen Toner. Then he starts asking about an article that came out and who was actually talking to the reporter. So as read, from the article, Sutskever had been waiting for a moment when the board dynamics would allow for Altman to be replaced as the CEO. And so he asked, what were the dynamics you were waiting for? And Ilya says that the majority of the board is not obviously friendly with Sam. Then he says, when did that happen? When there was a sequence of rapid departures from the board for different reasons. I don't remember what they were. I don't remember who exactly left, but that's what it's referring to. Question, so for how long have you been planning to propose removal of Sam? This is where it gets wild. For some time. I mean, planning is the wrong word because it didn't seem feasible. He didn't even think it was possible. He wanted to for a long time, and I'm going to tell you how long, but he didn't even think it was possible. He says it didn't seem feasible. It was not feasible prior, so I was not planning. How long had you been considering it? At least a year. So he was unhappy for a long time. And after the firing, Ilya was surprised by the reaction of OpenAI's employees. I don't think he really understood the cultural significance that Sam Altman had and the morale influence Sam Altman had on OpenAI's team members. So as read from an article, Sutskever was astounded. He had expected the employees of OpenAI to cheer. That's cheer at Sam Altman's firing. Is that true? He asked Ilya. I had not expected them to cheer, but I have not expected them to feel strongly either way. But they did. Remember, there was a whole campaign where so many of OpenAI's employees were posting on Twitter, OpenAI is nothing without its team, or something along those lines. All right, next, the witness, Ilya, gets passed to Microsoft's lawyers now. Is it your belief that Sam Altman will have a financial interest in OpenAI someday? And remember, we just found out Sam Altman continues to have 0 shares in OpenAI. So when he was in front of Senate and said, I have no financial interest in making OpenAI successful, I'm already a billionaire, I don't need more money. He said, hey, that was a little tone deaf, but yeah, it was true and continues to be true. I have no stake in these companies. Ilya says, I recall reading about it in the news, but I don't know how accurate it is, meaning Sam Altman having eventually a stake in OpenAI. And then Ilya Sutskever ended up leaving OpenAI and starting his own company, his own frontier lab, Safe Super Intelligence. So the lawyer asked, why did you leave? Ultimately, I had a big new vision and I felt it more suitable for a new company. At the time immediately prior to your departure of OpenAI, did you have an equity stake in the company? Yes, obviously. What do you believe the value of that equity stake was at the time you left? And then they go back and forth again saying, Ilya should not have to say what the value of that stake is worth, and it's irrelevant to everything else we're talking about. And of course, a little bit more bickering. We've heard a lot of you today, so let me finish. I love that. Then they go back. Do you still have a financial interest in OpenAI? Yes. Has the amount of the interest increased or decreased since you've left AI? Increased. Of course, it's gone up in value. So apparently, since he left OpenAI, he's actually gotten more shares. And then they continue, and the shares that he did get and the increasing amount of shares have also increased in value. Has the value of your interest in OpenAI increased or decreased since you left OpenAI? Increased. Okay, now this next section is just kind of hilarious. It's bickering between the two sets of lawyers. And rather than me just reading it, I'm going to role play it with Alex. Be courteous and respectful.
You be courteous and respectful.
The court reporter says, the court reporter is noting for the record that it cannot be taken due to simultaneous crosstalk. Once counsel can continue with decorum in a professional manner, the record will resume. Let's take 5.
Yeah, don't raise your voice.
I'm tired of being told that I'm talking too much.
Well, you are.
Check yourself. All right, now back to the line of questioning. The lawyers ask Ilya, what is Safe Superintelligence? What is the purpose of that company? To do a new and different kind of research. And what does that mean exactly? I have a new idea of how to do things and I want to try to do them. Then they go on to discussing who's paying Ilya's legal fees for this court case. And it's interesting. Who is paying your legal fees for this? Objection. Then they ask again, who is paying your legal fees? I'm not sure. Ilya says he's not even sure who's paying for them. And have a guess, but I'm not 100% sure. How did you come to retain counsel? And then the lawyer says, I'm not going to allow him to answer that question. Once again, is OpenAI paying your legal fees? I think that's probably the case. So that's it. I found this absolutely fascinating. I loved the back and forth between the lawyers. I love the new information we found about this. It is seemingly inevitable that we're going to have a movie about what went down with OpenAI. And once again, thank you to Recraft. They've been a
There you go. And this is the kind of stuff that I keep seeing that kind of makes me a little worried about Sam Altman. I'm really just not a fan of the guy. Couch investor, 4 growth stocks to buy after the recent crash. So we're going to look at this. It's a good 26-minute video, and it'll be the end of the live.
4 companies, 4 smaller companies that aren't expensive, have not been expensive before. They're just cheaper right now. They all reported their quarterly figures. Now, before talking about those companies, let's maybe talk about what's going on in the market right now. And what's going on with the market right now is a couple of things. One, a lot of the high-flying names, right, were up 200, 300, 500, 600%. A lot of these names are unprofitable companies. A lot of these names might never be profitable in the future. Also, we still don't know what's going to happen. Rate cuts, no rate cuts in December. Right? Previously, a month ago, that was 90% probability of a rate cut in December. Now that sits, 50-50 or maybe even in favor of no rate cuts. Why is that? Well, we had a government shutdown. Government shutdown has ended. Market didn't really react to it. We're also not getting a CPI report. We're not getting jobs data. And so maybe the Fed might not be able to make a decision. Although, is one report going to be the difference between them making the good or bad decision? I don't think so, but okay, that's beside the point. Last thing here, if we're not getting a cut in December because of the lack of the data for October, then we're probably anyways going to get a cut in January because you're going to get that other data from November and December. So I guess if they don't want to rush the decision, then they'll just have to wait 30 extra days.
The body scanner reveals the brutal truth about your body that your regular scale will never tell you. For weeks,
Then you also had, in my opinion, the catalyst was, of course, well, the podcast, right? Brad Gerstner, Sam Altman, asking one very, very easy question, not getting an answer, just getting attacked. That might have been the peak, or at least the short-term peak. And then the market started to ask way more questions because, of course, as stocks come down crashing, well, the headlines keep on increasing. Right? The headlines keep on increasing. You then also have Michael Burry, the broken clock, came out with a short on Palantir and on NVIDIA as well. So all of that together is what led us to this video and this moment right now, where a lot of the high-flying names have come tumbling down since the start of October, mid-October, or some of them just the start of November. Down 20%, 30%, all the way to down 70%. We've covered that in a live stream, right? Some of these high-flying names are down significantly over the past month or so. Now, usually these corrections happen over a long-term period. What we've been seeing over the past, especially I would say 12 months or so, are flash crashes, are corrections that happen in a week or two, and then we recover. We've seen that in February, or late January, maybe beginning of February, the DeepSeek drama. Remember, a name like Nebius went down 38% or so in a day. NVIDIA was down, God knows how much, also in a day. Then we've had April, the April crash. Huge correction in the market. Huge correction in the market. Also, quick recovery. In the short term, those things aren't great because you're feeling extreme pain in a short period of time. But, just like when you rip off a Band-Aid, it's very painful for what? 2 seconds, 3 seconds, but then it's over. But if I rip your Band-Aid very, very slowly, right? Every second, an extra inch. That pain is going to be, well, not for 2 seconds, it's going to last a minute. And me personally, I'd rather you just rip it off, it's painful for 2 seconds, and we move on. Same with the market here. Market doesn't like it, okay, crash everything in a week or two, and we move on. To me, it's just much better. Yes, it does create those extreme volatile moves. I know. But I'd rather see this than a 12-month bear market. Now, another thing that was interesting is that on Friday, actually for the last 2 Fridays, we've seen the S&P drop below the 50-day moving average and then close out the day back above it. For the NASDAQ, well, the NASDAQ is actually about the same thing, right? If we look at the NASDAQ 100, same thing here. Last Friday, we've seen it drop a little bit below the 50-day moving average, recovered, closed above it. This Friday, we've seen it go under quite a lot more, under the 50-day, also closed above it. Is it a dead cat bounce, or is it maybe the sign of, okay, we might see a recovery pretty soon? I don't have a crystal ball, unfortunately, otherwise I would have given you all the answers in a second. But what I do know is that next week we have Nvidia that reports their quarterly figures on Wednesday. And of course, Nvidia sits at the center of this whole AI bull market, right? Nvidia as well has seen its stock go under the 50-day moving average this Friday and the one before it. Guess what? It went under and it closed above the 50-day moving average. We've seen quite a lot of stocks do same thing. Actually, with Intel, I believe Intel touched the 50-day moving average and then it went above it. If we look at Friday, voila, Intel touched the 50-day, closed above it. Then we have some other names that were not so successful, right? One of the neo clouds out there, Nebius, 100-day moving average, went below it. Intraday did recover, but we closed just under that. We are now filling that Microsoft deal gap slowly and slowly. Will it go all the way back down? Remains to be seen. To me, the next stop is probably going to be around $75 or so. And then we have dLocal, which is a name that we will cover in this video. Same with Transmedics, same with Pagaya, and then another one. So dLocal, same thing here. Stock touched the 100-day moving average, did not go under it, but stayed above it, did recover a little bit. dLocal is a company that is small, $4 billion in market cap, cheap in my opinion, profitable, reported a good quarter. Yes, there was maybe one thing that the market didn't like, and so the stock did drop, but luckily for us, before they reported, stock did go up for 4 consecutive days, so we're basically at the same prices we've seen last Friday or start of Monday. And so if you enjoy this type of videos, hit all the buttons, would really appreciate that. If you want to support me even further, do check out the link down in the description and in the pinned comment to the top 10 best stocks to buy now, or go to fool.com/couchinvestor. Thank you very much, and a special thanks to Fiscal.ai, previously FinChat, for sponsoring this video. Everything, every metric, every transcript that you're going to see comes from this platform right here. If you use my link, you'll get 15% off. It's in the description and in the pinned comment. So dLocal, $4 billion of a company, year to date still up 17.1%, trailing PE of 24.5 times, forward PE of 17.3 times, still expected to grow revenue and EPS quite quickly over the next 2 years. Margin-wise, it's also not bad of a company, especially not one that is this small, still growing quite quickly. Yes, I know. You have to understand that this is a company that is, yes, in the payments market, but specifically the global south, so emerging markets, which are, yes, which are riskier than operating, let's say, in just North America or something like that. You have emerging markets, you have fluctuations in currencies, and maybe some economies there are not that stable, so all of that does impact a company like dLocal. But it is a huge, huge market. And again, this is just a $4 billion company at the moment. And so what went wrong, you might ask? Well, I'll start with what went right, and that's this here, TPV. TPV is a very important metric. TPV is total payment volume. You can see that this one increased 59.5% year over year, now above $10.3 billion in just one quarter. Now, what went, let's say, wrong, or what still continues to go in the same direction as to what management has told us, and that's take rate. And in this case, take rate went down from 1.07% in Q2 to 0.99. But there is here a what they call sort of a one-time bigger impact from the others category here, 0.04%. If you remove that, it would still be a decline, but a smaller one. And again, they keep repeating the same thing time and time again. Net take rates are still expected to come down slowly, but they believe they can make up that impact by just increasing TPV much more. I've seen people talk about this, and a lot of people are correct, right? Will people still be looking at net take rates coming down slowly if TPV is at $100 billion in a couple of years or more? Probably not. Probably not, right? And Adyen has a net take rate way lower than dLocal. Of course, Adyen's TPV is multiples times bigger than dLocal, but still, Did the market only look at net take rate for Adyen, or were they looking at other metrics for the business? In my opinion, they were looking at other metrics for the business. Now, that's not all. The other thing was gross profit. So gross profit still increased nicely year over year, but only 4% quarter over quarter, and gross profit margin did come down a little bit. Now, they said the following thing: that was partially offset by Egypt and temporary margin pressure in Argentina and Mexico. With Egypt, this is again something that they mentioned the quarter before. One big advertising merchant, we're speculating if that's not maybe Meta, we don't know, but one big advertising merchant has basically, well, slowed down all of their investments, and that does impact a company like dLocal. Again, a small company, big market, but if you have one big merchant in that specific market that starts to spend a little bit less, you're getting impacted by that. Now, going back to what went well is this. If you look at Buy Now, Pay Later, 2.5x volume growth quarter over quarter. It's now live in 6 countries across Latin America, Africa, Middle East, and Asia. This is a revenue share model, so there's no credit risk taken by dLocal. That's not all. They also told us the following thing specifically with regards to Buy Now, Pay Later, and that's that they expect Buy Now, Pay Later that's growing faster than overall market expected 20% compound annual growth rate between 2024 and 2027. Then as for guidance, and yes, during the live stream, I was quite confused because last quarter guidance was raised, but I was still confused by where these light blue rectangles were put. They were still put on the old guidance, despite them raising guidance. So it was quite confusing. So in my head, it was, oh, they actually reduced guidance a little bit. But no, they're not telling us where they think they will land on the updated guidance, which is still very good because TPV still expected, we're now expected to be above the upper range of their guidance. So above 50% year over year. Revenue around 40% year over year growth. Gross profit around mid, so 32.5% year over year growth, and adjusted EBITDA also around mid, 45% year over year growth. Now, the key risks here are not something that they expect to happen, just something that you need to take into consideration, things that might affect guidance. One last thing here, and that's with the weakness in Egypt. They did say that they've seen some volume recovery that began in October, which could help with the upcoming quarter or quarters, if of course that recovery does continue in November and December. And so to me, dLocal, easy pickup. Moving on to company number 2, and that's Transmedics. Transmedics is also a company that is trading around $4 billion in market cap. Here the PE is a bit higher, but this is also a fast growing company. Trailing PE 45.4 times, forward 43.1, but the PEG ratio is at 0.3 at the moment. This is a company that's also expected to grow revenue quite rapidly over the next coming 2 fiscal years, although growth rates are coming down a little bit, but that's not the whole story. EPS is expected to grow 72.9% compounded over the next 2 fiscal years. This is a company that is still up 72.9% year to date, but as you can see recently, it is experiencing a small drawdown. Now, this is also a company that reported earnings not that long ago. Good earnings report. Stock should have did react positively, but the whole market went down, so it takes down these types of names as well. And so, as you can see, this is a company that has been growing very, very quickly over the last couple of years. Yes, you can also see that the September quarter is a quarter that gets hit by seasonality, because that's one where you can see a drop quarter over quarter, still increasing revenue 32.2% year over year. If we look at the expected growth for this fiscal year, that's 35.7%, and then only 19.4% in fiscal 26 and 16.8% in fiscal 27. In my opinion, these growth rates are quite low, especially since they are now trying to grow, they are going to grow in Italy and expanding internationally further into Europe. This is a company that generates revenue through service revenue and net product revenue, which is the one that is here the biggest one. When you look at margins, gross profit margins is around 60% over the last 12 months. If you look at operating margin, that sits at 16.9%. Now, last quarter, these were the numbers. Let me actually move myself right here. you can see the following thing. Product revenue increased year over year, same with services, but both of them again down quarter over quarter. Q3 seasonally weak quarter. Owned aircraft 21 for a quarter, but it's already at 22. Net income did increase by $20.1 million year over year, but is down 10.6 million quarter over quarter. Gross margin up 2.9 percentage points year over year, but down 2.6 quarter over quarter. And then operating margin up 12.6% year over year, but down 7% quarter over quarter. If you look at the overall picture of this company, this is a company that is doing exactly what it should be doing. That's growing, becoming much, much bigger. See margins here, operating margin year over year, that's up. Gross profit margin, that's up. Year to date, you can see a lot of good things as well. Don't just focus on what happens one specific quarter, especially a seasonally weak one. They've also updated their own guidance. They're now expecting to grow revenue approximately at 36% year over year at the midpoint, continued increase of organ utilization and OCS adoption. That's basically their assumption. Now, Singularity Research here is tracking the amount of flights that TransMedics is doing. They did 28 flights and grossed $1.9 million, estimated number, over the last 24 hours, which was yesterday on Friday. They are on track to do 2,256 flights and gross $153.4 million, again, a rough estimate this quarter, which would be the higher end, if not beating the guidance for Q4. And as you can see, since after TransMedics reported, stock is down from the peak 18.2%. Is the company suddenly 18.2% worse today than before? Or again, is this macro? My opinion, this is macro. It has nothing to do with the company. The company is doing what it should be doing. And if it does reach their targets of 20,000 transplants by 2030, then this company, of course, will be much, much bigger than the $4 billion that it's trading at right now. Of course, you need a long-term vision for this company. You need to follow that company. But right now, the metrics show that this is one that is going up and to the right. Moving on to the next name, and that's also a name trading at around $4.8 billion. That's Shift4. Shift4 year to date is down 35.5%. This is a very profitable company, also a cheap one. Trading PE 32.5 times, PEG ratio of 1, revenue growth 25.1% CAGR for the next 2 years. If you look at EPS, expected to grow faster than that. If they reach their free cash flow goals for 2027, $1 billion, trading at $4.8 billion in market cap. It's really not that much. Yes, it does have an enterprise value of $9.6 billion. Why is that? Just look at the net debt here of $3.2 billion. Am I worried by this? No, at least not now. More recently, they attended the KBW FinTech Payment Conference. Yes, a lot of companies are going to these conferences after they reported their quarterly figures. So what did they reaffirm? Medium-term guidance targeting $1 billion adjusted free cash flow exit rate by 2027. They, of course, authorized $1 billion repurchase program, doubling the size of the prior one, which is also, in my opinion, why the stock did go up a little bit after it dropped over the last couple of days. Global Blue's revenue grew 19% year over year, with global sales in stores up 5%. Organic growth is tracking to 18%. They achieved a high 40% adjusted free cash flow conversion rate in the quarter. If we go and look at the last quarter, again, all of this is available to you on fiscal.ai. We can look at the following thing. Last quarter, volume increased by 23%, gross profit 62%, gross revenue less network fees 61%, diluted EPS on a GAAP basis 17 cents, net income $33.4 million. Again, that's not all. This is a company that despite being very cheap by the market, also with a high short interest, I still don't understand why, they're executing, and they've been executing actually for many, many years now. Yes, this is a company that does like to acquire other companies. Some people don't like it because they think that at one point there might not be any companies to acquire anymore, and that will stop the growth here for Shift4. I just think that's absurd. Right? I don't think there will be a lack of companies in the future. Plus, as this company grows and does integrate all of the acquired companies, it becomes more efficient. They are deleting parts. It has a better offering, right? They can cross-sell to many of their customers. They're now available in 6 continents around the globe. So I just don't believe the bear thesis at the moment. Another thing to note here is that one, they're the number 2 in the restaurants in the United States. Number 1 is Toast, the company, not the number 1 player is Toast, meaning they're screwed. Number 1 in hospitality in the United States. Number 1 in sports and entertainment in the United States. And number 1 in luxury retail globally. You know, next year there is the World Cup in the United States. I think it's quite a good thing that we are the number 1 in hospitality in the United States and the number 1 in sports and entertainment in the United States when there is a World Cup on the horizon. If we look at Shift4 stock, it did go under that uptrend line that started all the way back here, July 2022, did recover, and right now we are trying to stay close to that previous bottom right here. The previous bottom right here was the bottom in April. To me, this is a cheap company, one of those that I will keep accumulating and grow the amount of shares that I own. Lastly, there is Pagaya. Now, Pagaya is a company that I had call options for January. They were deep in the red, and I decided to basically convert them into shares, what was left of those call options, the $30 and the $40 strike price for January. And so Pagaya, as you can see, is also here at the 200-day moving average, and on Friday we did see it go up 2.2%. Pagaya is a company that reported earnings a couple of days ago. You can see that after they reported earnings, stock went up 15-18% or so, although closed the day up only 13%. And then after that, we can see that the stock fully retraced to the price not seen since before they reported a great quarter. Now, for those that don't know, Pagaya is a very small company. It's a company worth just under $2 billion, but it's one that is, of course, outperforming this year by quite a lot. It's up 148% year to date. But it is a company that is still expected to grow nicely, revenue and EPS, especially EPS, compounded growth over the next 2 years. It's a company that is becoming more and more profitable and, well, continues to grow. Now, what was the problem? Why did it drop since the peak in September? Was it company related, or was it again sector related, or maybe another company in that sector that was quite weak? Well, yes, it is sector related, and it's also because of some other companies that try to do the exact same thing that don't really put up the numbers that they need.
I almost passed out from a mold reaction in my own basement. My hospital grade HEPA filter was running right.
But Pagaya, as you can see, last quarter, network revenue increased 19%, total revenue 36%, revenue from fees 36%, production cost was also up 35%, fee revenue less production cost increased 39%, core operating expenses dropped 11%, net income for the quarter, not a net loss, adjusted net income increased 180%, and adjusted EBITDA increased 91%. This slide, again, says it all. Every time we hear an analyst talk about maybe one of competitors or something that is not going in the right direction, just look at this chart. This is going up and to the right, and becoming profitable. This is a good business, small business, but yes, there are, let's say, some fears, especially when it comes to credit. Now, talking about credit, the company told us the following thing. Management described macroeconomic trends and overall consumer behavior as healthy and stable. This stability is attributed to a balanced and conservative underwriting approach adopted since the beginning of the year. This strategy positioned the company with a needed cushion against market volatility. The company's B2B business model, which focused on partner and product expansion, and by the way, the partner pipeline is growing. They've also signed a large regional bank in the United States. So, all in all, again, good commentary, good quarter. I'll continue here. So their B2B business model, which focuses on a partner and product expansion rather than aggressive marketing tied to high approval rates, helped to mute the impact of broad consumer credit behavior changes compared to traditional B2C lenders. The most impactful financial metrics showed that the strategic decision to tighten credit standards is paying off dramatically. Cumulative net losses for 2024 quarterly vintages are trending 35 to 40% lower than the peak that they've seen in Q4 2021. Cumulative net losses for 2024 vintages are trending 50 to 65% lower than comparable periods in 2022 for auto loans, and point of sales credit trends also remain stable and consistent, supported by robust investor demand for these assets. And this, of course, is a company that is extremely picky when it comes to the applications, right? If you look at the $266 billion applications evaluated in Q3, that's up 12% quarter over quarter, they have approximately a 1% conversion rate, right? Conversion rate of applications to issued loans in Q3. You might say, oh, that's just very, very small. If they are so good at what they're doing, shouldn't that be higher? Maybe it will be higher in the future, but right now, this also allows them to be in a better position in a, let's say, market that still has quite a lot of uncertainties. And me personally, I rather them, yes, stick with this right now to only accept quality instead of, okay, we're increasing it, but then the quality of these loans do come down, and that will essentially also hurt the overall business. And then, yes, and then maybe everything does come crashing down for a company like Pagaya. And so all in all, that's about it for me in this video. 4 companies, small market caps, but in my opinion, great companies, good businesses that are trading at very, very attractive prices. The next video will focus on, let's say, bigger companies. So stay tuned for that. Hit all the buttons. Do check fiscal.ai down in the description.